biblical epic, aliens snatching bodies, an epic based on the greatest novel ever written, Hitchcock pulling double duty, Kubrick beginning to discover his vision, a Civil War epic, children behaving badly, a Jules Verne epic that spanned the globe, trying to find hope inside the confines of a World War II prison, a Rodgers and Hammerstein epic, Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield redefining on-screen beauty, a Western epic, James Dean being aged with makeup better than whatever the hell they tried in The Irishman, and Yul Brynner's big bald head popping up in every other movie that year. It's time to revisit 1956. I am your host, Andrew, and I welcome you back to the Revisionist Almanac, the show that gets into the time machine, takes a deep dive into past Academy Award ceremonies, and determines what the voters that year got right, and more importantly, what they got wrong. This is the second episode of the season, and as will be a common theme throughout the year, I have two guests, both making their first appearance on the show. I'm a huge fan of both their work, and I can't wait to spend the next couple hours talking movies with them both. So up first, she's an elite critic over at In Session Film, Search Magazine, and Keith Loves Movies. Please give a warm welcome to Kristin Battestella. Kristin, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bless your heart. It was a great intro. Thank you.
I have looked forward to talking movies with you. We've talked plenty on social media over the last year. I feel like you have a certain disdain for award ceremonies, which kind of made you the perfect guest for tackling this project. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Whatever gave you that idea?
And also joining Kristin and myself, he's one of the more popular and consistent great content creators on Instagram. You'll probably know him as Math Teacher Movies. Give a warm reception to my friend and yours, Sean Phillips. Sean, it's great seeing you, buddy.
Kristin, that was a great resume. I feel bad. It's like some guy on Instagram is next. He knows how to use Canva.
I know.
Well done.
Sean, we haven't talked really. We both did an episode of Greatest Movie of All Time podcast over the summer last year, Do the Right Thing. We haven't seen each other face to face since then, so it's nice to connect with you again.
It's good to connect with you. As we talked about we're going to talk about the prep for this, I feel like we know each other very well of our journey through 1956 for, I think, the past year. It's felt like that, at least, because I about a month ago, I started watching 10 Commandments, and I'm just wrapping it up now. But yeah, we're good.
We picked one hell of a year.
I was on the greatest movies of all time for Ben-Hur, too, while we were doing prep for this. So, yeah, I had a lot to watch.
A lot of Heston and the Testament, baby.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting episode as we get into some of the categories. It was not the year I was expecting when we signed up to do this particular year, and we'll get into that very shortly. But as a reminder, this show, again, looks back on past Academy Awards ceremonies with the luxury of hindsight to determine who should have won the Oscar for Best Picture, Best Director, and the 4 acting categories. Now, before we start things off, I hope you'll take time to rate and review the channel on whatever podcast streaming platform you're currently listening on, as well as finding and following the show on every social media platform using the handle RevAlmanac. So 1956. This is 60 years further than the year I just covered in January to kick off season 1, 2016. The 2 years couldn't be more different, doing them one after the other. For those that aren't familiar with 1956 the way the three of us are, the Best Picture winner was Around the World in 80 Days. Before we dissect Around the World and the other films, I'm going to ask you two some general 1956 questions to kind of start things off, warm everything up. So, Kristin, I'm going to go over to you first on this question. How did you find the prep project overall? What are your overall takeaways from this experience?
At first, it seemed a little daunting when you see the whole list of the movies, because there's a lot of long ones in there. There's a lot that seem like a chore, and they were. There's great ones that you've seen, that you can revisit, you can have in the background, you can kind of enjoy, you can see something out of them, but then there's a lot of them that are just real head scratchers of why are they on this list? Why? So it was good that we had time to break it up a little bit, because if you had to do this straight through, yeah, it would be so bitter, so upsetting.
I don't think we'd be friends for long after this experience if I put you through such torture. Sean, what about you? How did you find the overall process? This was probably something you've never done, taking like this kind of deep dive.
Well, I usually do like retro reviews, and my usual process is that I go on to I take one from my watch list on Netflix, and when I head to the Hulu app, I take one on my watch list from Hulu, one from the Criterion channel. I kind of had to stop that for a little while. and literally just focus only on 1956 since we first talked, which was like quite a long time ago. And so pretty much like any old movie I've watched has been a 1956 movie for an incredibly long amount of time, which, as we know, is pretty bad for some of these, but also like there's some great movies this year, just not movies that anyone would have heard of or wouldn't have even come close to the Oscars, especially at this time. But for the prep process,
did you fall asleep during any of them?
A few of them, yeah, definitely. I don't know if that was just like a lorazepam hangover or anything else, but it could be anything.
Yeah. No, my husband said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm busy. I'm working." I really. He says, "You're falling asleep." I said, I'm working." No.
Yeah, when my wife caught me watching The King and I, it was almost worse than her catching me watching porn. It was no, I'm just watching Deborah Kerr and Yul Brynner as an Asian.
And, for anyone that's listening to this, I would recommend going over to Sean's Instagram page because you can trace the trajectory of some of your watches over the last, it's been about a year, I think, since we've kind of planned this out, and you've slow rolled some of those reviews. I've been carefully keeping an eye on it to get some idea of where you might be going with this. But I would recommend anyone listening to this right now, go check out Sean's page and see those reviews.
It started with a lot of A's because a lot of them were on the Criterion, and then it dropped incredibly fast, like alarmingly quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a real curve to this particular year. Next question for you both is, a lot of the people that are going to be on season 2 here are going to be first-time guests. This will be their first experience doing this Almanac deep dive. So, Sean, over to you first. What would you tell someone who's maybe listening right now that's on a future episode? Do you have any advice for the best way that you found to do this prep? Because I've seen people do it, I've seen people cram, and I've seen people space it out over 6-7 months. How did you find the best way to do it was?
I mean, like it sounds easy to say, but just have a plan. You thankfully, as a peek behind the curtain, you thankfully give us this Excel spreadsheet with just like all the movies that we should watch. And so pretty much I just looked up which streaming services they were all on. And there's some that are still just question mark, because they just don't exist anywhere except like if you buy a DVD from like a back alley. So there's some that just will not refuse to be seen. The Bold and the Beautiful. I'm sorry. I bet you're a great movie. You don't exist. You just don't. But there was a lot of rentals. So, but if you're on all the streaming services like I am, you'll eventually pick everything up. But yeah, have that plan. And so then every month, check again, see what is going to be there. So do the ones that are on the streaming services first that you have. Don't do the ones that are rentals. Then when the month comes to the next month, see if those are no longer rentals, which some of them weren't. And so that worked out very nicely. Thank you, wrong man. Hitchcock for the holidays, baby. We did it.
Yeah, wait, you don't own that Hitchcock? I'm concerned.
I'm a bad physical of everything of Cinephile. I'm a bad physical media owner. I just and then I told my wife, I was like, I think I'm gonna start collecting physical media again. She's like, no, you're not. We have a daughter now. We need to get her food and space for toys.
Mm-hmm.
That's not happening anymore.
Yeah. For Christmas, I just got the Crimson Peak 4K. My husband's like, don't you already have this like twice? I'm like, yes, but this one's different.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Planning, yes, that was the biggest thing for me. I realized that, I had a lot of these already on DVD, and then so many of them were only pay streaming, and you definitely have to calculate, pick and choose your battles there on which ones, you're going to rent or buy, or which ones are worth it. A lot of these were not worth buying on streaming, honestly.
Well, thankfully, most of them were like $3 rentals. They're not exactly wicked prices.
You wait for your little my Prime credit points. Ooh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I would also say for a future guest who's listening, take advantage of your local library because a lot of the movies from this year, my library just happened to have, so I was able to rent them for free through the library branch pretty extensively, which helped out. The Wrong Man was one of the ones that I couldn't find anywhere except for my library branch had it. But I would definitely agree with spacing this out because if you try to cram, I think that you might drive yourself insane. So I space things out as well as I can, though I'm doing this every single month, so it's definitely a challenge to keep up, but I'm hoping my guests have enough time. So I'm glad that you both found that you had enough time to do this properly. Let's talk about 56 though as a whole. Do you have an overall takeaway from the year, from the collective bunch of films? Kristin, what's your 1956 takeaway right now?
It's all pretty meh. I mean, we're in the middle of the decade, and that is kind of what it feels like. A lot of these movies really feel like filler, even though we're past, the 30s sort of studio assembly line as we know it. A lot of these movies just seem to be going through the motions, or why are they so long, or they don't seem to know what they're doing. So that notion, I think I said to you before, about people who presume all old movies must be classics, but that's not necessarily the case here. That some of these are just kind of old bad movie. And it's surprising that even Oscar really had to reach in this pool. It's a shallow pool.
Yeah, Sean, what about you? How did you find 1956? Just the totality of it.
Well, this was the year where movies were remade into these animated movies, such as Anastasia, The King and I, and Prince of Egypt. So pretty much, like, we knew that this was, like, back in the 90s, the off-brand animation was really hunting for some good stuff. And sometimes...
Yeah, the Ten Commandments and
Yep.
Man Who Knew Too Much were already remade.
Those were already remakes. Yes, exactly. The Man Who Knew Too Much, remade by Hitchcock once again. I think the British one is better. We can get into that later. Yeah, this was just what you said. This is like big bombastic pictures, which are just gonna, like, back then got nominated for Best Picture. Like, now they would, like you said, we have the benefit of hindsight. Now they would probably get trashed a little bit more. Nobody cares if you can make a big 4-hour epic. Nobody cares if, like, you make a new Rome in the city and you made The Godfather as well. Like, they don't care about those things, and so they'll just overpass you. And so I think that this is old school Oscars, and they always peak up. The old school Oscars peak up. I mean, I look at the 80s, where really complex, interesting movies were passed up for, like, Out of Africa and Gandhi and Amadeus, which is good, but, like, those are the ones that are, like, the big costume dramas, if you will. And so those will sometimes just win for the sake of, like, the attempt that was made.
Thank you. God, this is so much. I probably should write this down at some point, my coffin of Oscar disdain. And as a kid in the 80s, that was my number one thing, of, like, that there's these separate elite award films that are period pieces, Merchant Ivory, that are supposed to be something special. I mean, even though, Raiders and Aliens got nominations, but I mean, like, Back to the Future, The Terminator, the better, long-lasting, great movies did not receive the awards. And I thought, okay, there's, like, this prestige divide or something. Now we've kind of come to the opposite of, oh, the prestige movie has to also be a box office special. And the 50s are the same way. The 50s and the 80s, I have a lot of WTF in these Oscars, really. Maybe that was the Reaganism coming back. I don't know, but it's like they definitely have this sort of, I don't know, old white man elite vibe or something to them.
Well, This year it's either going to be a 4-hour drama about an architect, or it's going to be a musical about a transgender. It's going to go either way. Transgender drug cartel. So really, this one could really span the globe.
I was thinking that. I'm like, did we really need 3 hours for Around the World in 80 days? And I'm like, you know what? Today that would be a trilogy. Part 1, 2, Part 3. They'd spread out the whole globe Avengers. No.
Netflix limited series easily.
Yeah.
It's wild to look back at this year, though, because it really is the year of epics, as I was kind of like teeing off in my intro. There's just every other movie felt like an epic in the runtime. I did a little bit of calculation, and Sean, you'll appreciate this being a math teacher. The average runtime of the Best Picture nominees in 1956 was 175 minutes, which is insane. And that doesn't even include Richard III at 155 minutes, War and Peace at 208 minutes. So it was just a crazy year. And then I'm not going to put the cart before the horse too much, but of all the epics that year, The Searchers getting completely blanked at the Oscars is one of the all-time what the fuck moments that
number two on my disdain list. Yes.
So we'll dive into The Searchers, which I expect to get a lot of the conversation tonight. The other big takeaway from me for this year is this was a year I had largely overlooked in my particular film watching time. 16 of the 35 movies that I watched for this year I had never seen before, which is kind of a rare thing when 50% of the movies effectively are things I'd not seen. One of those 16 movies is going to make it into my Best Picture lineup, so keep your eye out for that one. But for the most part, the movies that I knew were good going into prep held up, and the ones that I was dreading, I dreaded just as much rewatching them. So like it kind of played out as I was expecting it to. Which leads me to my next question to the two of you. What's the worst movie you watched for prep? Sean, why don't you start us off? What's the bottom of the barrel? If you want to, on the last episode in January, our guests were a little more tactful. They didn't want to throw any shade into anything, but if you want to, this is your
I feel really bad saying it. I think it's Around the World in 80 Days. Like, of my grades of these, I'm very generous with my grades. I gave a lot of C's because I'm like, it was very racist, but there was some good scenes. So, like, Carl Malden just casually dropping N-words like it's the word table. And so I'm just saying, like, I was just thinking, you know what? I think it might be Around the World in 80 Days because that movie just feels without a point. It just doesn't even have a point. And, like, oh man, I remember watching it and being like, why was this created except for vistas, which aren't even that impressive, and an app resolution that's just god awful. So, I reviewed that one a while back, but I gave that a D, and it easily earned that. And I don't know why I even gave it above an F.
Yeah, it's like, I guess normal people, if they were glancing at this list, they'd be like, oh, Earth versus the flying saucers. Oh, poo poo, that must be horrible. It's like, you know what? No, that wasn't the worst. It wasn't. Yeah, Around the World in 80 Days. I mean, I don't get what they were trying to do, that it's supposed to be a spectacle or visual, because, I love Jules Verne books, and it's like, read the book. Don't even bother with the movie, please. The book is much more dynamic, honestly.
Yeah, we're gonna make it a clean sweep on this one.
Nice.
It is as much as I love a good hot air balloon ride, there is nothing about Around the World in 80 Days that satisfies me. This was a really incredible year of meh and average, like you said, Kristin. There was a lot of mediocre stuff, a lot of the C grade stuff, Sean. Around the World was a true D, borderline failing grade. It was
Yeah. The irony. I mean, it's like, it is kind of indicative of the year, though. I mean, just hot air.
I mean, I also don't want to tip my hand too much to future episodes, but this is one of the 10 worst Best Picture winners to me. There are a few other notable, really bad Best Picture winners, but this is in the conversation for worst Best Pictures in my opinion. So this will be the last time I mention Around the World in 80 Days for the next couple hours.
Yep.
And I imagine it's probably all three of us that are gonna put this movie to the side. So let's get into some better stuff now. Before we get into the categories, though, it's worth mentioning if Kristin, Sean, and I agree with any of the actual Oscar wins for any of the 6 categories we're going to dive into, that selection will skip the online voting process and get automatic entry into the Almanac. So we're going to list off what was nominated and what won in each category. We're going to wipe the slate clean. We're then going to make our own nominations and our own winner selections. A couple of quick Oscar notes for you both before we get into the categories. This was the first year where the Best International Feature became a competitive category. Previously, it had been given a Special Achievement Award since 1947. The winner of Best International Feature was Fellini's La Strada. Now, that film is technically from 1954, a year I covered in season 1 of the show. Because of that, I'm not going to include La Strada tonight in my nominations. However, if either of the two of you feel compelled to include La Strada, you are more than welcome to, since it was at play in that Oscars year. The winner of Best Original Story in 1956 went to Robert Rich for The Brave One. And Robert Rich was the pseudonym famously for Dalton Trumbo, who at the time was blacklisted from Hollywood. And this was the second time since the introduction of the Supporting Actress and Supporting Actor Awards that Picture, Director, and all 4 acting Oscars were given to different films. This wouldn't happen again until 2005, a year I also covered last season, in which Crash won Best Picture, though this show and your online votes revised that to Brokeback Mountain, which I think is a far superior movie to Crash.
I think the majority of movies are a far superior movie to Crash.
All right, you guys ready to get into the categories now?
Let's do this.
Okay. And for anyone who's watching or listening right now, one of the fun things about having Sean on this is I learned on an episode I did with Sean for another show last year, he kind of he flies by the seat of his pants, and so we're gonna find out maybe in real time some of these answers, which I'm looking forward to.
Behind the scenes, I forgot to pick my winners just before we went on, and I just now picked winners, and
Because so many of these movies are forgettable.
I can't. I'm still going with them. I'm still sticking with them.
Well, if you change your mind, you've got time. All right, let's get into Best Supporting Actors to kick things off. So the actual nominees for 1956 were Mildred Dunnock for Baby Doll, Eileen Heckert for The Bad Seed, Patty McCormack for also The Bad Seed, Mercedes McCambridge for Giant, and winning the Oscar was Dorothy Malone for her role in Written on the Wind. Now, you're both making your debuts, so to avoid putting the pressure on the two of you to start things off, I'll go ahead and I'll kick off the category with mine, and then we'll go over to the two of you. So here are the 5 women that are getting my nominations for 1956 supporting actress, and these are going to be alphabetically ordered by the film they're in, which is the cadence that I particularly go for. You're welcome to order them however you see fit. So I have Vera Miles for Autumn Leaves. I've got Patty McCormick for The Bad Seed. I apologize to this woman for what I'm probably going to do butchering her name, but I have Chikage Awashima for Early Spring. I have Jan Sterling for The Harder They Fall. And I have Dorothy Malone for Written on the Wind. So those are my 5. Now, the 4 women that aren't going to get my revised win, I think all gave really great performances, and I do recommend checking out all the films they're in just to see what they did in those movies. However, my winner is going to be Dorothy Malone, just like the Oscars had. I think Written on the Wind was a film I hadn't seen in a long, long time. I certainly was too young to like experience it with any like maturity previously, but going back to it, I was really taken by her performance. I'm also going to steal directly from Sean's Letterboxd review of the film because Sean, I think you nailed this better than I ever could. You said she's calculating, but also absolutely wild and chaotic, which was tremendous balance and a huge impact and explosion into the story. I think that's exactly what Dorothy Malone is in that movie. She explodes in that film. It really is a wild, chaotic performance, and I think the Oscars actually did a pretty good job nominating and giving her the win. So I'm going to go with Dorothy Malone, but I do hope you check out everything else that I nominated there. So let's go over to Kristin now. Kristin, who are your 5 women you have nominated, and then who do you have winning?
We have to start at the bottom first. That's so terrible. I had a tough time with this one because I really thought this was reaching. This was just a bad year for women overall, honestly, I feel. And even they originally had 2 from The Bad Seed. And I mean, I debated back and forth with 2 with the 10 Commandments. So, and I guess in random order. I did also add Vera Miles, but for The Searchers, not for Autumn Leaves.
Dude.
Why?
I had her I don't have her as a nominee, but I had her as a finalist for The Wrong Man. So I keep hearing Vera Miles, and I'm like, chick was busy, man.
She put in work that year.
There weren't a lot of women. They had to do something. I also kind of debated Dorothy McGuire for Friendly Persuasion. I felt she was more in support than as lead. I mean, at this point, I kind of don't care about category for all for this year because it's so thin. I actually have Helen Hayes for Anastasia. Still a sentimental, sad performance, but this is today, Clutching Pearls, there's going to be some people who probably would think it would be too saccharine and over the top, but it's a touching, necessary part of the film that I really enjoyed. And I didn't even, did you want my details on Vera Miles? Because we just latched on to,
Jumped in.
Okay, girl was busy. But, she's very much of the antithesis in The Searchers because she's supposed to be this perfect, white, sort of Swedish immigrant that's supposed to be at home waiting and all this time. But then, she even has those moments of her mother would want her dead. She would want a bullet in her brain. She wouldn't want her to have, bucks of her own. So this, as we'll get into The Searchers, the sort of the racism, the evilness, the deep-seated things in the character that she kind of is a real, not a bait and switch kind of character, but really carries kind of both of that complexity. So, and a lot of these movies, I'll tell you, why am I saying this as the woman? But some of these do feel like there's just an obligatory woman to be there. But my final 2, I was kind of torn between, am I including 2 from the 10 Commandments? But I did end up also still retaining Dorothy Malone. I did keep her. And then but my winner, I actually chose Judith Anderson for the 10 Commandments.
What was it about that performance over the others that you felt stood out enough to get the win?
Again, a long movie. I was very close to also including Yvonne DiCarlo because they each have, to me, because I know there's no tried and true rules here actually with supporting characters. And now we're debating this now. What is category for all contemporary still? But the idea that for me, they're characters that really have to drive the other leads, that they have to push and pull or tug them in the right directions that they need to go. So for me, even though she's not really in a lot of the movie, Judith Anderson, but she really kind of sets the whole thing in motion because she is the Memnet who knows the secrets about Moses. And she's, backdoor at Ann Baxter, like, hey, no, there's a big secret here you don't want to know. And then this is what pushes everything to happen, what Ann Baxter does to her in defense. So just a really kind of critical moment in this movie that without her, we wouldn't have had the whole separate, Moses discovering who he is and leaving kind of thing. So I thought that was a really like crook of the film that I thought she's just, it's Judith Anderson. she just walks on screen and you kind of notice. So, and yeah, but even then, these were still kind of weak to me. These characters, as much as I'm saying, yes, these were good characters. They did what they were supposed to do. They tugged and pulled the leads, but you're kind of like, are these powerhouse performances that I'm going to remember forever? Do they blow me away? Are they the most exceptional thing that some of these people have ever done? No, that was what was frustrating for a lot of these films, even the directors, that so many of them, like when you look at these, like I dropped Mercedes McCambridge, but it's like she was better in Johnny Guitar. She's better in Touch of Evil. It just seemed like they were picking the people who were there. And it's like, these weren't even their good stuff.
Yeah, this category especially felt incredibly thin. I wasn't in love with my 5, but it was about the best 5 I could pull, unfortunately. Sean, what about you? Let's find out where you go with it and see what we got options out there.
So I have, starting off, Karuna Banerjee for Parajito. Could be argued for a lead, but I think that the main character is the boy, so I'd give it her the supporting. Then I have 2 Bad Seeds, Eileen Heckart for the Bad Seed, and Patty McCormick for the Bad Seed. I have Celeste Holm for High Society. I figure that there's 3 huge stars, and then she just comes in and blows them all out of the water. Like, really does. I just the moment she's on screen, I'm like, oh yeah, she's a cool one. And then finally, Rita Moreno for The King and I. I thought, it's an interesting performance. It's an emotional one. It's very quick, but I thought there's a powerhouse there. And my winner is Eileen Heckart for The Bad Seed. That movie is a performance showcase to the point where I don't even know if it's based on a play, but it feels like they just filmed a play in a room. And she just comes in almost halfway through for just a couple of scenes and is just hitting dingers. She just kind of knocks it out of the water. There's a campiness to it, which I think you could strike against. But I just remember seeing this movie and I was like, oh boy, that might be my winner for supporting actress. Because I saw that one very early and it turned out to be, yeah.
Yeah, I also had Banerjee. She was just outside my 5, but I was close to getting her in there. And then Vera Miles in The Searchers was my number 7. There were a couple that were just outside my 5 that I wanted to try to squeeze in. Heckert was also kind of in the mix for me. Kristin, what any honorable mentions? Even though it was kind of a thin year, were there any women that maybe we're going to get in that 5, or was it pretty set for you?
It was pretty sad. Maybe I even would have had less.
4 nominees.
Pulling back the curtain a little bit, you did message us in our little group chat a couple of days ago, and you're like, do I have to do 5 every category? It's like, unfortunately, yes.
I imagine the people voting out there would just be like, whoa, what happened on the pod where there's only 4 nominees for this one?
Yeah, ditching the babes, man. Sorry.
Sean, what about you? Any honorable mentions you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mentioned Vera Miles for The Wrong Man, playing as you mentioned, the tacked on female character of the wife, but, having a lot to do. Anne Bancroft for Nightfall, I thought was a really interesting dynamic performance. And Doris Day for The Man Who Knew Too Much. Once again, possibly a lead, possibly a supporting, but that final moment is pretty solid in my part. I loved that moment. So, but those are mine. Yeah.
If it wasn't Dorothy Malone for me getting the win, I was close to giving Chikage Awashima from Early Spring the win. I really thought she was great as the wife in that movie. It's not my favorite Ozu film, but I do like that movie quite a bit. Honestly, I don't think there's a whole lot more to hash out in this category. It just wasn't the greatest category, so I'm glad that we were all kind of on the same page. When it gets to the vote, though, the voters are going to have 3 options to choose from. They can go with both myself and the Academy, who are aligning and making early bedfellows. We have Dorothy Malone for Written on the Wind. Kristin has Judith Anderson for The 10 Commandments. And Sean's got Eileen Heckart for The Bad Seed. So 3 very distinct different options, and you can choose any of them that you see fit. All right, let's jump over to supporting actor. We'll see if this is any better than supporting actress. It might be, it might not be. So for 1950s, Mickey Rooney for The Bold and the Brave, Don Murray for Bus Stop, Anthony Perkins for Friendly Persuasion, Robert Stack for Written on the Wind, and taking the prize that night was Anthony Quinn for Lust for Life. All right, Kristin, why don't we go over to you first to start things off? Who are your 5 gentlemen, and who's your winner?
Another one where did I have people on the outside looking in, or maybe double people up or something? I would keep Anthony Quinn, but not as my winner. I feel bad saying that because it's just we love, again, this is a case of a year of like we love the people in them. If you're doing people's filmographies, yeah, great, see these movies, see all Vera Miles is epic, but it's like, yes, see Anthony Quinn, yes, this is really great, but was this his best or was this the best of the year? I'm not so sure. I did also add Edward G. Robinson for the Ten Commandments. And I would also keep Anthony Perkins for Friendly Persuasion. Again, I guess when we'll get into it, again, this wasn't Gary Cooper's best, but this is just a charming movie. This is a real, really like, yeah, why didn't Anthony Perkins win anything? He's kind of really the standout of the movie for me. And it's a great book, but I can't read my own writing. I'm also going to double things up because I wouldn't list Yul Brynner for supporting actor for Anastasia.
Good one.
But did I say 4 or 5? My winner would actually be Ward Bond for The Searchers. I think he's just, again, a really fascinating. All the people here are just so multifaceted in this movie. He's supposed to be the minister who's the upstanding citizen of the community. He's doing the dances and the sing songs, marrying people, but then he's also like the head of the Texas Rangers, and he's going out on the raids. He's like changing his hat, pulling off his badge, changing his coat, putting on his spurs, and then when they're out chasing, they use terrible engine type terms, he's shouting hallelujah while he's shooting the Comanches in the back, and then when somebody else gets shot, he hands him his Bible. He's like, you sit right there, it's good, this is good for you, and then he just gets back up to shooting people. So it's a very, again, a character who both aids, pushes and pulls against, what Ethan Edwards has to do. And Ward Bond is just somebody that I guess every time he pops up in a movie, he's just really awesome and excellent. But there's, really some memorable, nuggets from him in this movie that make you go like, wait, what? He's like, he's a minister and he's shooting people. Okay.
So if it wasn't Ward Bond, who's the closest competitor to him? Would it have been Brenner and Anastasia?
Maybe, but I have other feelings for Yul Brynner for other elsewhere. There should have been a special award for like Yul Brynner's year, like I guess Vera Miles' year, who popped up in the most movies this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've dug into a few years in this general era over the last year plus, and these actors are pulling off double, triple, quadruple duty with a lot of frequency. It's pretty wild to like go back and see, and then contemporary actors aren't working with that same veracity. So it's definitely a fascinating thing to go back and kind of watch just the amount of stuff that they put in those years. I don't want to assume anything before the episode's over, but I'm expecting some more Searchers wins from Kristin. So I'm glad we got
that idea.
I'm glad we got the first one on the books right away. So Sean, let's go over to you now. Who are your gentlemen in supporting actor?
So I start off with Eli Wallach for Baby Doll. Dude's just a straight up chameleon. Like, I have to look at him for IMDb to know that it's Eli Wallach. I'd never have seen that guy look the same twice. It's amazing. Interestingly enough, an actor from Bus Stop, and I enjoyed Don Murray, but Arthur O'Connell for Bus Stop, I think, is an interesting, like, more grounded performance. Don Murray was funny and goofy, but I liked Arthur O'Connell there, keeping him in check. And so here's my first controversial one. Here it comes. James Dean for Giant. I think that if they ran him in supporting, which he clearly is, we've talked about complaining about category fraud, and usually I say, shut up about category fraud. This is one where I'm like, if he didn't Gladstone or Williams himself, he would have won the Oscar. It would have, I believe it would have been posthumous at this point, but his legacy would have won. I think it would have been a clear shot. But I kept Anthony Quinn in there for Lust for Life. I had to do it. It was just, I loved Lust for Life, man. That movie's bonkers in so many ways. I had a blast with that one. And then finally, Anthony Quayle for The Wrong Man. I just recently watched The Wrong Man, so that's a little bit fresh in my head. I really enjoyed that movie, and I think that a good old fashioned lawyer performance is always fun. And my winner is James Dean for Giant. I'm like really passionate about that one. I'm like, man, that guy could have done it. Absolute untouchable, beautiful movie star performance, which doesn't always get the Oscar, but just like the talent was unrivaled, and it would have been just great to see it.
Was that a first time Giant watch for you?
No, I watched Giant before. I still don't like Giant. Once again, I guess I have to turn to my cinephile card. I don't know what's wrong with me. Everyone's like, Giant is amazing. I'm like, boy, of the 3 James Deans, Giant, like, his performance is great, but like, it doesn't do it for me. And I think I have Giant for, I don't think I have it for anything else, but, oh no, I have it for a few other things. But yeah, it doesn't really do it for me. The performances are solid, but the rest of it's a little bit meh.
Yeah, I have Dean in my lead category just because like that's where he was, but as happens frequently on this show, people move people in different categories, which is totally fine. I think there's a very easy, compelling argument to why James Dean fits supporting probably more than lead. So I think that's a pretty good spot. If it's not him, who's winning it for you? Who's like the runner up?
Looking at this one, I think I would go with Quinn for Lust for Life. I think that was just a real hoot of a performance. And, just as Don Rickles always just imitates him in roast, just like, oh, you want some of that? Like, just really boisterous kind of moves, just performing to the back row, which you don't need to do in a film.
All right, well, let's go over to mine now, and we'll see if I have the person that either of you selected or anyone else, and then we'll wrap it up with a couple of questions. So here are the 5 gentlemen that I have in supporting actor. I have Hanu Banerjee for Aparajito. I have Anthony Perkins for Friendly Persuasion. I think he's fantastic in that movie. I've got Rod Steiger for The Harder They Fall. I gave Rod Steiger a lot of crap on the December episode of this show for In the Heat of the Night, which I don't think he's great in, but I think he's really good in this.
He's literally 6th place behind Portier. Like, it's just it's the roughest best actor lineup, the greatest best actor lineup of all time, and they go Steiger.
Yeah, exactly. And we corrected that on the show, fortunately, but yeah, I think he's really, really great in The Harder They Fall. My 4th nominee is going to go to George Sanders for While the City Sleeps, which is a movie that I had never seen before, and I was really impressed with that. And then my 5th nominee is going to go to Robert Stack for Written on the Wind. So really all 5 of the guys I have kind of on the same level. There's not really a clear winner for me. Going into it, I thought Anthony Perkins was going to be my pick. I always sort of do like a pre-prep who I think is going to win, and then after I do it all, I go, okay, actually, this is the person that takes it. So I thought it was going to be Perkins. It ended up actually being Robert Stack for Written on the Wind. So this is the 2nd supporting category I'm giving that movie a win to. I think his drunk acting is top tier.
It's really good.
I would recommend go back if you've never seen Written on the Wind, and if you're only familiar with Robert Stack from being the voice and face of Unsolved Mysteries, which I was for basically the duration of my life. Like, he's a revelation. I covered him on 1942's episode last year and nominated him for a film that year. I am impressed with what I saw in 1956 and Written on the Wind. This has like made me want to go back and check out everything Robert Stack has ever done because he's just so much more than I ever thought he was, and I was really floored with it. So Robert Stack is 100% the choice for me. I'll quickly say to Anthony Quinn, Lust for Life was a first-time watch. Nothing really stood out to me in that movie. I don't know if it got lost. I don't know if it was like wrong place, wrong time. I'm not sure. It just wasn't a movie that really moved me in any particular way. I liked the shout out for Eli Wallach and Baby Doll, which was definitely in contention for me. A couple other honorable mentions. Jeffrey Hunter in The Searchers, I think, is a fantastic performance. And then Vince Edwards in The Killing, Kubrick's The Killing, is a really good supporting performance. Yeah, this was a substantially better category than supporting actress in terms of there was a little more depth. There was still some weakness here and there. First and foremost, Mickey Rooney for The Bold and the Brave getting nominated. That was my least favorite supporting acting performance of them all. What the hell were they doing giving him? I don't know. That nomination doesn't ring true to me. But
Mickey Rooney was like Streep in The Teens, where it was just literally just, like the 20 teens where it's just like, oh, she's in it? Go. Like, just every single time. Like, just because he's Rooney.
But
exactly.
I jumped into this year because I said to you, yes, we're going to have to make some rectifications here with The Searchers. But then as we got into it, there's so many of these films that you're excited about some of these films. You're surprised, you're impressed by them. Then others, there's enough impression where you're like, I want to see this person. I want to see what else they're doing. And then you're like, oh my God, look at me seeing them in something else that's so much better than this, that they were actually nominated. You're like, okay. You're like, I like Mickey Rooney, but really?
Yeah, I mean, this was a great, like you said, this was a great year to discover some performers and some performances that I didn't know some of these people were capable of. And I think Robert Stack really exemplifies that. So again, if you haven't seen Written on the Wind, I would highly recommend just checking it out, at least for Malone and Stack's performances alone. Any honorable mentions the two of you kind of have top of mind that you want to give some love to? Kristin, anybody kind of hanging out there for you?
I was debating about Jeffrey Hunter. I didn't want to make everything all doubled up the Searchers. Again, someone who just, I guess, had such a short-lived career. I mean, many people probably would not know him elsewhere. Maybe if they see the Star Trek pilots or King of Kings or something, people would not know who he is. But yes, he's spends the majority of the movie, big shoulders and little man, following around John Wayne, and yet he holds his own. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was the nominees that were there, like Anthony Perkins, Robert Stack, Don Murray. Like, those were all people I really debated keeping on. I think that they were all, like, Don Murray, very fun performance. Robert Stack, like you said, great drunk acting, and just being like, hey, that's the guy from Airplane. It's just kind of like trying to reckon with that. And then Anthony Perkins, it would be really interesting, like, looking at this trajectory with this and Psycho. And he's obviously more than those two roles, but just seeing those two, it's like, wow, opposite ends of the spectrum completely.
When was it before this? He was in Fear Strikes Out. So I can imagine at the time, like, today, this is what frustrates me about today's awards, where they try to fetch some of these people, and you're like, really, why? And then there's some gem people that get kind of ignored. So it's like, I can imagine in the 50s watching something like Fear Strikes Out and Friendly Persuasion and being like, hey, this kid, Anthony Perkins, there's something to him. And then when you see Psycho and you're kind of like, yes, yes, Granddaddy Slasher.
And then he won the Oscar for that, and everything turned out great.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't have to revisit that one.
No, not at all.
Well, that's the perfect segue. We actually have a listener question related to this category that we'll just jump right into now. So, friend of the show, Chauncey Talise, sent over a question, and his question was, who do you think finished second that year in supporting actor to Anthony Quinn? And is it a more fun timeline if that person had actually won? Is there somebody that you think, of the 5 actual nominees that year, who do you think was second? And what do you think the trajectory would have been? I'll quickly jump in. I actually think that Robert Stack was the runner-up for what I saw. And if he wins, does he go on to do Unsolved Mysteries? Does he go on to do some of these other choices in his career with an Oscar to his name? I don't know. It's an interesting world. So that would be my answer. Do either of you have who you thought was second?
Realistically, it's got to be him, probably, I would think, because by all these picks that they're going by, yeah, they're just picking the big names in their mid-tier, their contract movies, probably. So I don't think they would have awarded Anthony Perkins. That's more of the, hey, young kid, you did all right. You were second to Gary Cooper's son. Okay, good job. So yeah, I think they probably went with Robert Stack.
I mean, it's either Robert Stack or Don Murray. I think back then they were a little bit more kinder to comedy, and supporting actor is where you give the comedy award, really. So I think that, like, that would be, and that was a boisterous comedic performance and a goofy one, and it's just a frustrating character that just sticks in your craw, and you're just so pissed off by him. And I think, like, you just think about him for a really long time.
But I'm like, but he's a jerk to Marilyn Monroe. I'm like, come on, we nominated a man for being a jerk to Marilyn Monroe.
And they would love that. I mean, I just think about that. I'm like, please, just at the end of this, don't fall in love. Please don't fall in love. And spoilers for Bus Stop, it goes exactly how you think it does. And I'm like, come on, don't do that.
The whole time you're watching the movie, you're like, please circumvent the predictable path. And we all end up in the spot where we thought we were going to end up. And I will also say really quickly to Anthony Perkins, even though he was my pre-prep anticipated pick and he didn't end up getting it, that's not a knock on his performance. I think he's terrific in Friendly Persuasion. That's a really good role to go back and check out on Revisit. But we do have 4 different options when we get to supporting actor. I've got a pretty good feeling what the online community is going to go with, but we'll find out. So you can go with Kristin's option. She has Ward Bond for The Searchers. Sean's got James Dean for Giant. I've got Robert Stack for Written on the Wind, and the Academy, of course, that year had Anthony Quinn for Lust for Life. All right, let's get over to the Best Actress race now. So the nominees in 1956 in Best Actress were Carol Baker for Baby Doll, Nancy Kelly for The Bad Seed, Deborah Kerr for The King and I, Katharine Hepburn for The Rainmaker, and the Oscar that year went to Ingrid Bergman for her performance in Anastasia, as Yul Brynner would say. Sean, it's over to you first to kick off the category. So who are your 5 women, and who's your winner?
This is where I overlapped with the Academy probably the most of any category. My nominees are Ingrid Bergman for Anastasia, Deborah Kerr for The King and I have Marilyn Monroe for Bus Stop. Because, like, as problematic as that movie is, it just shows that she was more than just her movie star persona. She had more in there, and I wish that she was treated better in so many ways. I mean, then Elizabeth Taylor for Giant, And Dorothy McGuire for Friendly Persuasion. I put her on here. And this is where I'm most aligned with the Academy. I put Ingrid Bergman for Anastasia. I think that this was just a really dynamic performance. It's the one that like cliche will win though, because you're doing the most. But even like while I'm watching it and I'm watching her do the most, I'm like, yeah, she's still earning it for this though. And like her other win, Gaslight, is equally as great. Like it would be tough for me to pick which one would be her better one, but I really did like her performance in this. I really almost went with Deborah Kerr in The King and I. Oh god, that was a very close runner-up for me. I really like that performance a lot, but I had to go with Ingrid.
Yeah, I mean it's a great performance, a really strong win. I'll jump into my nominations and then we'll go over to Kristen and we'll see where we kind of all stand and go from there. So here are the 5 women I've got for lead actress 1956. I've also got Ingrid Bergman for Anastasia. I've also got Elizabeth Taylor for Giant. I've got Colleen Gray for The Killing. She's tremendous in that movie, surrounded by a whole lot of dudes doing dude things. I've got Deborah Kerr for Tea and Sympathy, which was a first-time watch. And for the 3rd time I've nominated her since the show started, I have Audrey Hepburn for War and Peace.
Oh, good.
So I think this was a really strong year for this particular category. I think there was a lot of compelling, dynamic, different performances. I'm glad, Sean, you gave Monroe her flowers for a minute there because she is really captivating in Bus Stop and really proves, her acting ability in that movie. You've got people like Barbara Stanwyck, you've got Doris Day, Grace Kelly. There's so many women, Joan Crawford. There's so many other women I wish I could have tried to squeeze into this 5, but the 5 I got is the 5 I got. So Audrey Hepburn was really close. I think she kept me in War and Peace way longer than I thought I was going to stick her. I was
Yeah.
got it. When I turned on, that was on Canopy, which was a fantastic app to have, by the way. But when I turned that on, I'm like, there's no way I'm making it through 208 minutes of this damn thing. And I pumped that thing out in one sitting. God bless Audrey Hepburn for keeping me engaged in that thing. But I think the most noteworthy performance is undoubtedly Ingrid Bergman in Anastasia. So I'm with the Academy. I'm with Sean on that one. She's a revelation in that movie. I also don't know if it's Gaslight or this movie that I prefer what she does in. Those are definitely the 2 that come to mind. But yeah, everything Ingrid Bergman touches turns to gold for me. So that's definitely where I'm gonna go. Kristen, you have the opportunity to make it a clean sweep and give Ingrid Bergman an automatic win, or you can go somewhere else and throw it up to a vote. So
The suspense. I kind of, this year, this category, I don't know if I felt more of a mixed bag. I'm surprised they nominated the people they did because I felt that there were better outside performances. But I did keep Deborah Kerr. I don't really like Deborah Kerr, but I mean, she does a lot in this movie. I mean, not to be cliche, corsets and hoop skirts, but she's got to do a lot. It's just the whole nature of the movie. It's let's think about this here. And I did not have Grace Kelly because, again, someone who did a lot greater things in like the year before and the year after. And also the idea of high society, I don't love because, again, like you said, like this was just Streep. They just nominated Katharine Hepburn. Yes, this is performance. But if we've got Katharine Hepburn and we have high society, it's like the Philadelphia Story is right there. And I added, you had for support, I had Doris Day here for The Man Who Knew Too Much in lead actress. And in a very superficial, today, like that one Que Sera Sera would be enough for somebody to ride the whole season. Like, oh, look, there's a hit song in the middle of this movie. Will you sing it live, like acoustic at the show? That's exactly what would happen. You know that. I would also keep Carol Baker in Baby Doll. Yeah, she does other great things elsewhere, but this is very juicy, very memorable. I feel like this is the kind of movie, I feel like it's kind of slinky that people are shocked that it's a 1956, and maybe you think you see what you don't really see in it because she's just, is juicy inappropriate to say? I'm sorry, but it's true. And I would also add Marilyn Monroe in Bus Stop. I feel like it's the opposite of, instead of song and dance or laughable, that people thought she was only comedy, stand there, be cute, that she has one song here and it's very sad. It's a very emotional, upsetting song here. So, I feel like this is the first there. I feel like there may have been a few earlier. Oh, shoot. The one she's in with Richard Widmark, where she's the crazy babysitter. It's black and
I don't know
white.
that one.
Lordy, I can't think of it. I can't think of it now. I'll have to look up while someone else is speaking. But I feel like she had earlier black and white performances that could show that maybe she was capable of something more. But I feel like Bus Stop, and then you get the Misfits after. But I really appreciate her in here. But yes, my winner, I had to keep Ingrid Bergman for Anastasia.
Oh my God, it's a sweep.
Yes.
I was not expecting that.
I thought I was going to have to defend it. No, I mean, this is one of those movies where, I mean, now maybe it's like 15 or 20 years ago now, where they actually did find some remains and they used Prince Philip. They tested the DNA and they actually did truly find out that nobody survived the revolution, that the Anastasia was actually dead. And then even going back and rewatching this movie, knowing the actual facts of like, you know what, there was a con woman who obviously wasn't the real thing. But when you're watching this movie, you are still so caught up in, oh, she's got to fake it. She's putting on the mannerisms. Oh, but wait, she has a memory that she noticed, that it's some kind of connection that she picked up. Today, maybe some people would find the little coughs that she does, that's a little bit much. But no, but you're so into it of like, no, she's really sick. She has really problems. You want to, it's the idea that the movie overcomes what we actually know about the history because we're just so invested in her performance. That's why I did also have Yul Brynner for my support, just because he just really, really balances her. Like I love the scene where they're not really on camera, where it's like they're open doors of their bedroom and they're like in and out, back and forth, kind of talking to each other, and you're like, they're flirting with each other and like they're not even on screen. So he really elevates her. Of he's training her, he's falling in love with her. Do you want her to be the princess or run away with it? I thought I would have to defend this, but yeah, no.
I did not see all of us aligning on that one pick, so that's really cool because I thought for sure we'd be all over the board tonight, but all of us are in alignment. Ingrid Bergman does not have to go to an online vote. She's an automatic entry, which is a very rare occurrence on this show so far, but I'm happy to see that. Any other women you just want to give a little bit of shine to? I'll throw out really quickly another name I didn't mention. I thought Lauren Bacall in Written on the Wind was also a really strong performance in that movie. There's honestly just I have a litany of I've got 29 different women written down that I thought gave really good lead performances. I could go on and on. I will. I don't mean to do this because I like Katharine Hepburn, but I feel like a lot of her best movies are the ones she didn't win and get nominated for, and I don't love her in The Rainmaker.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
That's Sean. Sean, I think you and I had a very brief, very cryptic exchange about The Rainmaker on social media. That movie is confounding to me.
Oh my God. Like, what is happening in that movie, man? I don't understand, like, any character at all, like, any of their motivations. It was the weirdest movie, dude. Like, and yeah, Hepburn is still Hepburn. Like, I will watch her do, like, not that it's a bad performance, but I'll watch her in anything with that voice, with that, like, beautiful
That's
style.
what this movie is.
Yeah.
If you had to choose a Katharine Hepburn movie, there are so many better.
That too.
And I'm sorry, I had to look it up. Don't Bother to Knock is the movie.
Is the Marilyn Monroe. I gotta look that one up. I haven't heard of it.
I don't know if I'm familiar. Yeah.
52.
Kristin, is there anybody that just missed your 5 that you thought was close to making it in, or maybe you want to give a little extra attention to?
Really, I kind of had to. I had the women that I kind of dismissed again because yeah, I'm gonna watch Dial M for Murder, To Catch a Thief, if I want to see Grace Kelly.
I had Chikaji Awashama for Early Spring. I think you had her in supporting. I had her in lead. I think it's a little on the line. Then Nancy Kelly for The Bad Seed as well. Like, for as much as I was bored by The Bad Seed, and like there's like I was just like, wow, this movie is against adoption, which is a really problematic thing. Like I loved the performances, and I think it was just because they leaned into the camp. And so like Nancy Kelly was pretty close for me.
Yeah, that's not a movie that I felt was in contention too much for any of the awards nominations, but I had a really fun time watching that movie for kind of what it was and like how much it seemed to like bother people in that particular time period. So that was a fun movie to go back and just experience because I don't think I'd ever seen that before. That was definitely a first time watch for me. All right, so Ingrid Bergman locked in. She's gonna be a revised winner, just like she was in real life. So congratulations to her. Let's get over to the Best Actor category now. So here were the 5 gentlemen that were nominated in 56. You've got James Dean for Giant. You've got Rock Hudson, also for Giant. Kirk Douglas for Lust for Life. Sir Laurence Olivier for Richard III. And the man who took top honors that year was Yul Brynner for The King and I. It's also worth noting James Dean became the only actor to receive a second posthumous nomination for acting, the other being East of Eden the year prior in 1955. So it's going to be back to me to start off this round. So here are my 5 Best Actor nominees. Up first, I've got Francois Leterrier for A Man Escape. Second, I've got James Dean for Giant. I completely understand Sean's sentiments for putting him in supporting. I went ahead and kept him in lead. I've got John Wayne for The Searchers. I've got John Kerr for Tea and Sympathy. And I've also got Rock Hudson, but not for Giant. I've got him for Written on the Wind. I really liked what he did in that movie. Yeah, I vibe with Rock Hudson just in general. So when I see Rock Hudson on screen, I know I'm gonna have a good time. And I was into him in that movie. Again, on pre-prep, I had John Wayne penciled in for The Searchers, but there were 2 other actors that I think at least stood shoulder to shoulder with him. And I ultimately went with one of those 2 others. So John Wayne's not going to get my win. I have a feeling he might show up on someone else's win, but we'll find out. The 2 gentlemen, it came down to Francois Leterrier for A Man Escape because that movie is literally entirely hinged on his performance and everything he's doing. And the other was James Dean in Giant. And I hadn't seen Giant in a long time. And what James Dean does in that movie really captivates me. The way he plays a man aging over time. I bought into him being an older man. I was completely transfixed by James Dean in that movie. And I think that if he hadn't had died at such a young age, he would probably be in the conversation for best male actors of all time. Like his trajectory was very clearly heading in that direction. And for anyone who maybe doubts James Dean and just thinks he's this iconic sex symbol and like face of beauty, go back and watch his actual work because Giant like floored me with what I saw from him. So he's going to get my win. So that means that James Dean has the potential to win both lead and supporting, which the precedent had already been set in December when Anne Bancroft won for The Graduate lead and supporting. So we'll see if that happens a second time. So James Dean's going to be my pick. Kristin, let's go over to you now. Let's see who your lead actor choices are.
I actually would keep Laurence Olivier for Richard III. It's just so delicious. Like you're so inside with him and you're like, this is demented, but I like him. I enjoy this. Then once you realize you're kind of in too deep, it's too far. And I get the idea. America, I don't think was into Shakespeare at the time. And the way very shrewd where his direction worked with being him actor with his ego worked excellently with this part. But the way the sets, some of it looks a little cheap, but 50s garish colorful, but then other parts you're like, this is really heraldry and pompous. And so I get why Americans might be put off with it. I feel like the Academy nominated him because they felt like it's Shakespeare, it's Laurence Olivier, we have to do so. But and I guess it's not something I would introduce Shakespeare to people with this movie, but it is so juicy, it is so delicious, and you're like, dude, okay, like, you're like, you've gone too far with this now. And now is the winter of our discontents. Yeah, right. And maybe I made the mistake also of watching this Richard III, but also there's a 1995 Richard III with Ian McKellen. That's very like pseudo-fascist. I made the mistake of watching them relatively close together and in our post-2016 kind of era. And you're like, oh, okay, this is still a really relevant role. And the way the Academy might have been kind of annoyed that Olivier was trying to release this in movie theaters and have it be like a US TV special at the same time. So I'm like, okay, he was thinking ahead here. So I still like this Olivier performance. It's much cheekier. I slightly prefer this more to his Hamlet. This is one of the cases where I said it seemed like he could find other people better elsewhere in these roles. I'm kind of like, well, yeah, no, if you want to know why people think Olivier is Olivier, watch this Richard III. And I also did keep James Dean in this category. I could see why you could say he would run away with support, but it's like, to me, he's the star of this movie. He steals the show. I don't love Rock Hudson. I drop him. I had this Giant on one of those thick bubble, like double-decker VHS things when I was a kid, and I would fast forward, man. Okay, I only wanted to see the James Dean scenes. It's everything about James Dean here is excellent, and the way his character kind of really encapsulates the metaphor of, their journey, their oil, their everything's bigger in Texas kind of metaphor. And I like this, he's without a doubt in a star. And again, this is where, yeah, if you need to see a James Dean, this is my favorite James Dean performance, even though obviously in the grand scheme of the movie, maybe he's got lesser than time than if you're watching, Road Without a Cause or East of Eden. But no, I would definitely keep James Dean. Drop Hudson.
That's his new nickname.
Drop Watson. I would add Henry Fonda for The Wrong Man. Obviously, there are more superior Fonda performances, but again, another one that I think is really relevant. Even though this was kind of a down year for Hitchcock. I mean, again, between Rear Window and to Catch a Thief, you've got kind of his. I feel like Hitchcock was probably in this phase now of doing like the studio movie, then the movie I kind of want kind of thing. So The Wrong Man, black and white, a smaller kind of subdued piece, but it's just he's mistaken for a crime he didn't commit, because of his ethnicity. So I thought that this was really still a really relevant, really raw kind of performance. And I have John Wayne for The Searchers, but he's not my winner. This was a tough one for me because it is without a doubt John Wayne's best work. Also adore Red River very much. And it does pain me when you think that he got the makeup Oscar for True Grit. Yes, it's fun, but it's like, he made 100 movies and True Grit is just like, 75 other of his movies, but he is exceptional in The Searchers. It is so dynamic. I will get into it in the future. I think a lot of this has to do with John Ford's direction of him. I mean, because there's some really excellent scenes where like there's no up close shots of John Wayne in this, and it's like the scene where he turns his back when they're in the army tent and he sees like the crazy women, and it's like even the camera stops. It's like even the camera's afraid of him that they won't go any further. So I guess people were surprised by John Wayne being grizzled and obsessed. So it's very tough for me not to give him my winner. My winner, actually, I do still give it to Yul Brynner, but for the 10 Commandments as Ramses, not for The King and I. So The King and I don't like makeup Oscars. I think half of Oscars' problems is they're trying to make up career stuff for other people when they should have just awarded, the real performance at the time. And because of his association with The King and I feel like that's the only reason they gave it to him for that. And I realize I have Charlton Heston on my outside looking in. I know they would not choose the villain, but to me, Yul Brynner really is the co-lead of this movie. Again, a lot of what happens in motion, you need to have the antithesis to have the hero in the picture. And he's the one that kind of goes on this journey. I mean, when he's, so obsessed in the beginning, just merely wanting to get back at Heston, he's jealous of him, wanting to catch, the deliverer in a bottle, to when you get to him at the end. And again, another one I had on a big VHS tape where I kind of was like, Yul Brynner's out of the movie. I don't care about the last half hour where they get the 10 Commandments. It's but when he actually has, that moment, where he says his God is God. And it's the idea that it's the Pharaoh who's now has come to say this. And it's just, so I think he's, again, a really impressive, commanding, again, the presence on screen in this movie. It's just, his little swagger with his little swishing little cape, when he makes an entrance, when he comes in. So I just think that this was a really awesome year for Yul Brynner. I just think he got won or nominated for the wrong things. So try and rectify for Yul Brynner, but yes, I do have to also, rectify for John Wayne a little bit.
Just know you're in a safe space when it comes to makeup Oscars, because that's like one of the key points of the whole concept of this thing is like the makeup Oscar drives me freaking bananas because like
I'll make new friends.
We all know those makeup Oscars exist and people can pretend all they want that they're not thinking about that. They're obviously thinking about that.
No, there's one of the finest chains in all of movie history is Art Carney beating out Al Pacino for The Godfather 2. Therefore, the makeup Oscar went to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman, which caused Denzel Washington to beat out Malcolm X, which then caused Denzel Washington to win the Oscar for Training Day. It is the makeup Oscar went so far and so deep.
How far down my Oscar disdain list do you want to go? You stopped right before. What was who lost because of Training Day? No, but I as a kid noticed this in the 80s because I was probably watching Top Gun and I saw The Color of Money and I'm watching this going, I like Paul Newman more than I like Tom Cruise. And then I'm like, oh wait, there's an earlier movie like about this. And then I'm like, wait, he won for the new one. I'm like, really? Like, okay, like that. I'm like, I guess they made it right, but that doesn't make it better. Makeup Oscars.
You did truly stun me though, Kristin. I thought John Wayne was like chiseled in cement for you. So that
No, I've got another Oscar win on my tombstone. It's not John.
All right, Sean, let's see. I feel like I kind of think I know where you're going to go, but let's find out.
By the way, I don't know where I'm going to go. So if you do, that's cool. So I've got my 5, and I've literally bolded every single name and gone back and forth. So I'm sorry, I didn't listen to anything you guys were saying. So, if you're watching this on video, you saw that I raised my arms for Francois Lettier in A Man Escaped. That's such a great performance. I love that you put that on there. So I have that as a nominee as well. And then I raised my hands again for Laurence Olivier for Richard III. Homeboy wanted a horse, and the desperation, it's so good. Then I have this is my ballpark one, Sterling Hayden for The Killing. I love Sterling Hayden so much. I love him so much, and I think he's great in this. Just the last moment when you see what happens, and just the look on his face, which is just a Sterling Hayden complete blank slate, but you could feel all the emotion there. I have Kirk Douglas for Lust for Life, mainly because of his decision to not do an accent and just be Kirk Douglas, which I love when an actor does that. Denzel, bravo, my man. You're in ancient Rome. Don't do the British thing. Like, go for this, dude. Like, I love it.
Don't end up like Jared Leto in House of Gucci.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah, be Jeremy Irons in House of Gucci. He's like, no, I'm just going to be Scar. F you guys. And then Henry Fonda for The Wrong Man, which I also got really excited for the mention. And I'm not kidding you when I said I bolded every single one of these names. So, like, when you say a runner-up, it's the other 4. I'm going with Henry Fonda for The Wrong Man. I think that what's interesting about this is not the type of movie where it's like, did he do it or didn't he do it? Because you kind of know from the start he didn't. Obviously from the title. But there is a few moments where you're like, oh, I get why people do suspect him. Like, because he does, like, once in a while have this glance of evil. He has this glance of formidability. And for the rest of it, he's this aw shucks kind of dude. And I kind of love that he really walks that line. And you see him suffering so much. Like I said, I am like, it is glowing recency bias for The Wrong Man, as you're going to find out in a couple later categories. I love this movie so much, and I just recently saw it. So maybe this will die down, but I love the Henry Fonda performance in this.
That movie really did hit me in the right spot too when I saw it. Like I hadn't seen it in many, many years, and I just had a really good time going back to it. A couple of honorable mentions I'll throw out, and then I'll kick it over to you. I'll also say about Yul Brynner. I think it was a matter of fatigue at a certain point. I had just seen him in so much in this particular year, and I was like, I'm just a little Brenner tired at this moment.
The
So
following year, he's in The Buccaneer with Charlton Heston again, and he's got like some fake hair thing for like Jean Lafitte, and you're like, what is this?
yeah, so I don't want to throw any shade at Yul Brynner. He's a fantastic, talented actor. I was just like a little tired of him at a certain point, and I thought some of the other guys did better. Humphrey Bogart gave a really nice performance in The Harder They Fall. That was a movie that I enjoyed. I'm so glad you gave Sterling Hayden for The Killing a nomination because he was my 6th. I wanted to get him in there. I'm a Sterling Hayden guy too. And then I'll once again mention Early Spring, the Ozu film. Ryo Ikibe was the lead actor in that performance, and I think he was really, really good as well. So a lot of good stuff there. Kristin, any gentlemen that were just outside your 5? Are you pretty happy with your 5?
Yeah. I mean, probably the obligatory Charlton Heston. But again, is Charlton Heston a little better than 10 Commandments than he is in Ben-Hur? I don't know. Because you look at Ben-Hur and you're kind of like, he won Best Actor for that? Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I might prefer him in 10 Commandments if I'm going to be completely honest.
Well, Ben-Hur, it's supposed to be epic. You're always on his side. There's, all the undercurrent of hope and thirst and cleanse. Excellent movie. That's, as I said, what I chatted about on Greatest Movies of All Time. But the fact that the 10 Commandments, like I said, this Ramsey, like Yul Brynner knows what he's there to do. He just completely revels in the part. Where the movie's so over the top, a lot of people will find some of it hokey. Every time somebody watches it for like their annual, no, I still call it a Passover movie, though I think they show it on TV for Easter. But when Charlton Heston has the subtle moments in this movie, I think are what are really excellent. Like when he is in the mud pit and he does help the old man, and the old man says, if only I got to see the deliverer. And when he does show up in the chains and he says, I'm not the deliverer, but if I could free them, I would. Then you're like, oh, damn, Chuck. I wasn't expecting that. Like, okay.
I love that what you like about Charlton Heston was his subtlety.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't know that. You're like, yeah. You're like, oh, okay. You're like, why didn't you do that more?
Like a lot more.
Subtlety and Heston don't often go in the same sentence. Yeah, that's good. Sean, what about you? Anybody that you want to give a little honorable mention to?
I really liked Gary Cooper in Friendly Persuasion. I also just really like Gary Cooper. There's a definitely Cooper bias that I have cooking. And so, like, anytime he's there, it's like, oh, I'll watch you read a phone book, my guy. You're just lovable all the way through. So I couldn't get my head out of that one. So that was my number 6. Not too many others. A lot of the ones you guys said, I also agree with. And I don't know, maybe you convinced me about James Dean. So we'll see what happens there. He's going to win.
But you kept Kirk Douglas. See, what frustrated me about that was, to me, that's an Anthony Quinn. He steals it. If you're going to watch Kirk Douglas, you're going to watch Spartacus.
Yeah.
So, as opposed
well, yeah. I mean, that's, yeah, definitely.
I love Friendly Persuasion, but it's like, yeah, is there better Gary Cooper? It's just Gary Cooper being Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
We're just going to go on little buggy chase with Gary Cooper, and it's going to be awesome.
Oh, well, that's what I like about him, is that he's like the very, like, you can't be a casual Quaker, but for some reason he kind of is. Where he's like the kind of guy that's like, hey, we could skip church on Sunday. Like,
I'll stop the thee and thous if you really want me to. I'll concentrate.
We can have a little music in the house, guys. Come on. Like, he's the one that, like, if you bought the meat sandwich on a Friday, you could have it. Like, it's okay.
We're a couple of guys, though, that I was expecting to do a little better that I wasn't that impressed with, and I'll critique them just a touch. Paul Newman in Somebody Up There Likes Me. That movie did not really resonate with me, and I'll once again touch on The Rainmaker. Burt Lancaster, what the hell were you doing in that movie? I'm a Burt Lancaster guy, but that, again, Rainmaker, just not my thing.
He was warming up for Elmer Gantry. That's what it is. Exactly. He was doing a couple of laps.
So there's just a better movie. Yeah, watch Elmer Gantry.
Just putting in his push-ups and
yeah.
When was The Young Philadelphians? It was an early Paul Newman movie. Was that before this? Was this after this?
Good question.
Because he had that horrible The Silver Chalice. I guess everybody was trying to do a biblical epic at some point. So yeah, the difference between Anthony Perkins, where you're like, "Ooh, this person's going to be somebody," to where Paul Newman, you're like, "Oh, okay, I'm not impressed by him just yet." Then when I was younger, when I first saw The Young Philadelphians, I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it now. He's Paul Newman."
Yeah, Paul Newman. Yeah, I was expecting to appreciate him more, being a Paul Newman fan, but that movie did not move the needle for me. So you're going to have 4 options when it comes to the vote. Only 3 people, but 4 options to choose from. So you can go with my pick. I have James Dean in Giant, which again means that James Dean will be nominated in supporting and lead. He can throw some chaos into the equation once again, so that'll be fun. You've got Sean's pick. He's got Henry Fonda in The Wrong Man. And then Yul Brynner will be showing up 2 times in the vote, both Kristin's pick, The 10 Commandments, and the Academy's pick, The King and I. So we'll see if Brenner's votes get split, which could happen. But I think something tells me James Dean's going to end up in that Anne Bancroft
double
category.
win again. This is how this one goes.
Also, do you think that's what happened then? That Dean and Hudson split?
Probably.
I think like King and I and Brenner were very popular too.
Yeah.
But yes, I think Dean and Hudson probably.
Again, Burt Lancaster, yeah, From Here to Eternity, him and Montgomery Clift probably split.
Yeah, well, that definitely, yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, and speaking to Hudson, because I liked what he did in Written on the Wind, I was not fully invested in Rock Hudson in Giant, even as much as a Rock Hudson guy as I am. And maybe it's because, like, I'm meant to sort of not like his character to begin with, that I was like, man, this guy, I don't know if I buy his arc, but I'll get to Giant a little more in a little bit.
He's like, Rock Hudson is a bit more queer coded in Written on the Wind, which is just something like, now that you have that like moment of realizing that this was a gay actor, it's like, oh, he's definitely bringing something better to that. Like, maybe it's just a male friendship thing, and it obviously was, but like there's an interesting level to that now that that he was.
Yeah, and the same goes for John Frankenheimer's film called Seconds, which I don't know if too many people have seen, but Rock Hudson is the lead in that film, and knowing Rock Hudson's personal story, that film is also incredibly queer coded and really resonant in today's time. So I'd recommend go and check out the film called Seconds that stars Rock Hudson. He's magnificent in it. All right, let's get over to Best Director now. So the nominees in 1956 for director were Michael Anderson for Around the World in 80 Days. No idea what they were thinking, but he was there. William Wyler for Friendly Persuasion. Walter Lang for The King and I. King Vidor for War and Peace. And the year's Oscar went to George Stevens for Giant. So, Kristin, we're going to go over to you first. Who do you have winning Best Director? Who do you have nominated, and who do you have winning?
Obviously, there's a couple that I dropped off this list. I don't like War and Peace. Don't like War and Peace. Don't like the book. I would keep William Wyler for Friendly Persuasion, but again, it is a case of he did a lot of better things right before and right after. Like obligatory nomination, I guess, for that one. I would keep Stevens' Four Giants. I think the picture itself, yes, has a big statement. It does say something. Again, are there better George Stephen things elsewhere? Maybe. Would I keep Lying for the King and I? Again, yes, just because of the sheer spectacle of it, trying to keep it like all together. You know, you're like, yes, it is a big, massive, impressive movie, like I guess, but there are definitely parts of it where you're kind of like, there's a lull in the movie, I can skip out on it. But I would add Olivier as director for Richard III. Again, I just think it's across the board really excellent. It reads relevant now. It's still very timely. Yes, get over any of a little bit of production datedness, but or hey, if you have to have your Cliff Notes of Shakespeare to get some of the language, it's worth it because it's just so juicy and so meaty. And sometimes compared to like Brana when he does his Shakespeare, you're like dial it back a bit, bro. Again, like I said, the ego just kind of fits for Richard III. And of course, my winner would be John Ford for The Searchers. Was there any doubt?
That was 100%. I think I even had that printed off on my page of notes here because I was
already had it.
Yeah. Speak to John Ford and his direction of that movie because I know you're a huge champion of that film. So
I'll let Danny take care of that.
It's excellent. I mean, to me, even Scorsese. I mean, if you want to know how to direct a movie, watch The Searchers. I mean, there's just the visual, and for many years, of course, I had it on a beat up VHS. And when I first saw it on Blu-ray, I wept because it was just so beautiful to see. Just the color, the natural environment versus the interiors, the way it's lit, the way the pacing of it. Like I think everything of it is excellent, and the way the visuals really parallel the metaphors of the story, where they're Texicans and they're so great and they're going to conquer this land, and you've got the little white Victorian house that's just sitting there like among like the picturesque like orange like mountains, and you're like they have no business being here. Why are they there? And just the way, like I said, the camera work that he did with John Wayne, knowing how to frame him, how there's parts where he's larger than life with his hats and he's called big shoulders, and the framing of him in the doorways, the way where John Wayne is never quite fully inside of a building. He never seems to stay in a building for one length of time where he's not meant to be indoors. And and I've never read the novel either that The Searchers is based because I'm just so beholden to the movie. It's one of the few times where I've never become, obsessed with both or able to see them both separately. And it's just really stunning. I guess if you had to argue if there's a lull in the movie, it is where they do have the little 5-minute, it's been 5 years and she's reading the letter of everything that's happened that's kind of told in flashback. But even that kind of fits the scope of like the gap of time and how long this journey has been and how obsessive he comes with it. And the way, as I said, the camera won't even approach him at that point, where we're like, you honestly do not know how far he's going to go with this, because you have people saying it's a good thing. He's going to go rescue his niece who's been captured by these Comanches. And then he becomes fanatically obsessed with it. And the way the camera does stay still at times, but yet we're on this journey the whole time. And you never feel like it's slow. It seems like we know we're building up to something. And when you get the great scene where they're actually in the teepee, and by this point, you've forgotten, you don't really know what she looks like. You don't know what they're doing. And it's just when he's talking to him and then he tells her to put the lance down with the scalps, and they just look up, and you know that it's her, that she's the one that they're looking for. And it's just this incredible moment of like, we're on the journey and we know, and now we're afraid because we see the look in his eyes. And you get to this point of like, is he going to kill her? He's not going to rescue her. He's going to kill her. And then you get to the end of the movie and you're like, oh. So it's just, to me, it's just an incredible, I don't understand how this movie was right there. And then they did not see it. It's like, come on, man, come on. I mean, everybody knew and loved John Ford, but there's so many things, I guess you could say, pick a better movie off your head of John Ford. Well, no, The Searchers. It's really excellent. I feel like it is also the kind of, for people who don't like Westerns or don't think they like old movies, give this movie a chance.
So glad I had you on to talk Searchers because
Sorry.
You're the perfect champion for that movie and for John Ford's direction, which is,
you were worried it was going to be a light episode, and I was like, oh, I could fill your time for you. As opposed to Dana and Tom, they asked me my favorite movie. They're like, we were not expecting that. And I'm like, really? Don't you know me?
All right, well, Sean, let's see if you're in line with what Kristin went with, or if you go in
You
a
are.
different direction.
You are. I've inspired you.
So I have Fritz Lang for While the City Sleeps. I'm someone who never got nominated for an Oscar, and but what? But then I have Alfred Hitchcock for The Wrong Man. The guy had a blast with that movie. And as Chris, you were sort of saying, he starts to do the big studio Hollywood things, and he did start to do those now, but he kind of had his way of gripping onto them in a certain way where he was able to do the big Hollywood, make it palatable for the audience, but still bring in that artisticness. And I think The Wrong Man is just so sensational. I guess I should rewatch The Man Who Knew Too Much again, but I like it. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not really, I don't know. Wrong Man just hit me on all the right spots. Stanley Kubrick for The Killing. I like so much about that movie that I love. Yeah, Sujiro Ozu for Early Spring. Unbelievable that guy didn't get nominated for an Oscar. And then I have in a nomination is John Ford for The Searchers. And boy, was this tough, and especially after what you were saying. I'm going with Yasujiro Ozu for Early Spring. I really, really love that dude's artistry, and I just love to put an international director in there as well. John Ford is sensational, and I do think that the unfortunate and completely criminal reason that he was overlooked was because I think he already had 4 Oscars at this point. The dude was always getting out. So and that's not the Academy before, and he earns the nomination, and if he won, that would be completely justified. The Searchers has the greatest shot in cinema that's been duplicated 7,000 times, and I don't even have to say it. I don't have to describe it. I'm not going to. You know what it is. Right now, if you're driving to work, close your eyes. Well, don't do that. But just imagine this shot. You know what it is. It is the greatest shot in cinema. And so, for that alone, don't worry, The Searchers is coming back. I'm spoiling that right now. It'll be there for you. But I had to give some love to Ozu. Now, will some people say, hey, Tokyo Story is the better one? Okay. I really dug this movie a lot, to the point where I really am waffling back and forth. I guess, I think you got to go with Tokyo Story for legacy, but I really love this.
I was going to ask you where your Ozu journey is. Have you seen a fair amount of his films, or are
I think
you
it's only been those 2, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got to go on a little Ozu journey. I guess through the seasons, I saw those titles.
Yeah.
And like an idiot, I did look them up to wonder if they were sequels to each other. They're not. I did. I just for a second was wondering. You never know.
Some of them are really tough to find, though. I mean, the Criterion Channel and the Criterion Collection, you can get a good chunk of them, but I had to. The episode I'm doing next month is for 1934, and I had to find an Ozu film from 34.
Oh God, good luck.
I found it. I have my ways, but it was a really rough copy of said movie. So yeah, I mean, Ozu's really, he's a fascinating director. He captures real life in a beautiful way, and the way he contextualizes everything. So I'm happy that Sean's got him in there, because yeah, he definitely deserves some love. It's crazy when you see how much love international directors get now, deservedly so. And then you go back in time and you're like, what was the Academy thinking, blocking out so many of these great international works that were out there? And Ozu's one of the kings of Asian cinema for sure.
Definitely.
Well, to them, the Olivier Shakespeare, that was their foreign, indie, odd, unusual.
That's when all the white men were balloting, and they're just Olivier. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, well, let's go over to mine and see if I'm aligned with anyone else that's out there, or if I've got something different, and then we'll dissect a little bit more. So here are my 5 nominees for Best Director in 1956. I've got Robert Bresson for A Man Escaped. I think that movie's directed impeccably. It's obviously headlined by a strong lead performance, but it's directed really, really well. I've got George Stevens for Giant. I think that he captures the scope and the space of Texas in a wonderful way. I've got Stanley Kubrick for The Killing. It's not Kubrick's best work, obviously, but you can see the pieces of where Kubrick's going to go, and it's a really tight story. I think it's barely over 90 minutes. It's a really fun movie to go back to, and at least for my preferences. I've got John Ford for The Searchers. I can't say anything more than Kristin has said about The Searchers and John Ford. He deserves to be. And then my 5th one's probably my wild card. It's Vincent Minnelli for Tea and Sympathy, which is again, that film that I had seen for the first time for this experience, and it really kind of took me by surprise what that movie was and what it was saying in 1956. This came down to three gentlemen. It came down to Bresson, Ford, and Stevens. I'm 100% with Kristin on John Ford and The Searchers. I think that, I mean, that movie speaks for itself. That direction speaks for itself. Close your eyes again, even if you're driving, and picture that scene. It's exquisitely shot. Spielberg, so many people have drawn all of their inspiration, it feels like, from John Ford and from movies of that period. And the Searchers. The Searchers is the John Ford movie for me. I know other people might pick other things, but when I think of John Ford, I think of one movie. It's The Searchers. It's got to be my win.
I'm a Stagecoach gentleman. I'll say it. I love a good Stagecoach, dude. It's so good.
I'm not hating on Stagecoach. He's got a lot of great stuff in his canon.
I'll say that because the Stagecoach, though, I feel like is largely a much smaller film. Again, even though we're always on the move, but it's a very small, congested, very intimate thing compared to the massive scope of The Searchers. But yet it also seems like a very intimate kind of journey that they're on. And it's like you look at this movie now, and now I'll be curious now that the 4K edition is out. It's like, do I need another copy of The Searchers? Yes, apparently I do.
4K, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's like, why did we stop making movies like this? You know, it's like, can we go back to that, please?
Well, even tougher is like I remember when I watched The Power of the Dog, and I'm like, wow, what beautiful setting and beautiful seascape. It was filmed in Australia. I was like, son of a bitch. We can't get anything right. I was so mad.
And in all fairness, John Wayne turned around to do The Conqueror, where they took the toxic dirt from the desert and then brought it back to the LA studio and apparently killed half the people in the movie who later got cancer. And it's a bad, terrible movie, him being Genghis Khan. You're like, oh, okay.
Movie magic.
Well, the things we do for movies, yeah.
A couple of nominees that are a couple of guys who just missed my nominations. I'll throw out some love to. Hitchcock for The Wrong Man was definitely in that conversation, so I'm glad Sean got a nomination in there. People online, I think, will appreciate the Hitchcock love. And then Douglas Sirk for Written on the Wind. Again, I'm just really glowing on Written on the Wind on this particular deep dive. That was just a movie I had a good time with. A lot of good guys. Fritz Lang, good call there. There was another Japanese director called Kenji Mizoguchi who made a film called Street of Shame that same year,
Honorable
which was
mention.
really good.
I loved that. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff there. Anybody else you guys want to throw out? Some directors
I will
that
throw out Hitchcock. I know I've spoken about Hitchcock a lot too. I mean, I guess, everybody knows I love Hitchcock, but another rectification to me, I suppose, I don't love On the Waterfront. I feel like Hitchcock should have gotten his laurels for Rear Window. So again, yeah, he didn't get director for Rebecca. It only got picture.
He never won an Oscar.
Hitchcock had his love-hate relationship with the studios, and and then we get bigger and better things later. I think these were smaller in a weird way to say it's an off year for Hitchcock, and yet we're both talking about two great ones, but or quote lesser Hitchcock that are still really excellent.
Are we all in the same conversation that The Man Who Knew Too Much, the other version, is superior? Because I prefer the other.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, that's when he was, that's when he was just like chilling in Britain, like just doing all the, and it was just like, yeah, these movies are amazing. Like there's like 39 Steps and like The Lady Vanishes, and those are just all these like
the way, like we're saying, some of these people, this is not their best work. Seek the rest of their body elsewhere, and it's like I don't understand why Hitchcock like was trying to perfect upon himself. So many times you see so many pieces when you're like, but no, these are really great. And not today, they're still trying to make that book, The Woman in Cabin 10, where it's like you read the description. It's like a woman goes missing on a cruise ship, and you're like, Alfred Hitchcock already did this. Like,
Sean, any other honorable mentions you have out there?
I didn't like these two movies that I have for honorable mentions, but I did like their direction. I think Baby Doll has quite a lot of flaws in it, but Elia Kazan, back to On the Waterfront, I thought like his direction was really good. And the scenes with Eli Wallach, I guess I just liked Eli Wallach and Elia Kazan, and just like so those three scenes are cool, but the rest of it, get out of here. And Jacques Tournier for Nightfall, which was like a beautiful film. It didn't really quite come together for me in the story, but man, was it beautiful at first. So I got to give that one some credit.
Yeah, I like seeing Nightfall get a shout out. That's definitely that was one up there for me too. A lot of really good direction there. William Wyler for Friendly Persuasion. I would have tried to maybe get him up in there because I'm a Wyler fan, but just missed out.
Well, once again, I think that's one where he was just warming up. The chariot racing was a little bit different. He manages to perfect that quite a bit as it goes on.
The Beef Country again, right after Charlton Heston and Carol Baker, like they had to jump cut the kiss, man.
Well, as much as I think Sean and the Academy will be trying to get some votes, I think that we all know what's going to happen when we get to the online community. You'll have three options, though. I'm expecting a pretty heavy favor in Kristin and my direction.
I might even vote for him. So I don't know what to tell you.
I appreciate you bringing Ozu to the table, though. He deserves some recognition, so it'll be nice to see him get some online love. But it's going to be John Ford for The Searchers, who Kristin and I had. Sean obviously had Ozu for Early Spring, and the Academy, of course, had George Stevens for Giant. So 3 options to choose from there.
Movie Friends is a film podcast for everyone, where 2 friends discuss some of the greatest films. Yes, Michelle?
Did you rehearse that?
Well, I'm reading it off a script for the commercial.
It's really not a commercial, it's a promo, but did you really think a script could describe our show?
Words are generally what are used to describe things,
No,
so yes?
No. Our show is fun. It's all about the dynamic between you and me and how you're a movie guy and how I'm definitely not a movie guy.
But you are like a movie guy.
No, and we talk about movies and we talk about life and cats and we're joking all the time. People listen for that stuff, not the movie stuff.
Right, but the movie stuff is like, that's the stuff.
Wow, maybe you should have rehearsed this more.
Movie Friends. It's a podcast about film.
It's a podcast about friends. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Patreon at Movie Friends Podcast. We want to be your movie friends.
But let's get to the big one now, Best Picture. The one most people really like to fight and scrap and claw for. So the 5 nominees for Best Picture in 56 were Around the World in 80 Days, Friendly Persuasion, Giant, The King and I, and The 10 Commandments, with Around the World taking the grand prize. This was the first year and last year until 1967 in which all Best Picture nominees were in color, and all were large-scale epics, which would set off a trend for Best Picture winners in years to come. Ben-Hur we've touched upon, Bridge on the River Kwai, Gigi, and so on. Sean, we're going to go over to you first. So what's your... And also...
Don't mention Gigi, man. I was in a good mood. I forgot that movie existed. God damn. Like, we talk about the worst Best Picture of all time. I think it's that one.
Finding out what that movie was really about as a kid, and I was like, oh.
Everyone involved in that movie should have gone straight to jail. Like, everyone.
Now, because this is a year there's only 5 nominees, we're all going to stick to that, so we've only got 5. So, Sean, let's see what your Best Picture lineup is.
So I've got Early Spring. I have, for the fun little box office one that they didn't do back in the day, but they do now, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like, I love that everyone involved in that was just like, it wasn't a political film. Shut up. But I love that, like, it's like a political film for both sides, kind of like Veep, where they're like, hey, they're making fun of Democrats. Like, you can really make an argument that it's either way, which is kind of awesome. Like, it's an equal opportunity political thriller. I have The Killing on here. I have While the City Sleeps. And then my winner, there we go, it's The Searchers. I think that, you know, as John Ford was my easily second place for director, and for this, I think that The Searchers, like, just massively beautiful Western, and like just one of the best Westerns out there. Really, like, The Searchers just wins this one. Yeah, I know. I thought of The Hotel as well. Right after I said it, I was like, I'm just gonna try to keep on powering through. No one noticed.
It's a really eclectic 5 films there. I love seeing all the
as
range.
I'm reading it, this doesn't make any damn sense. Like, this is silly. Like, what was I thinking here? Like, this, I love it though. I'm in. I'm sticking with them.
If it wasn't The Searchers, what would be the number 2 best film? Was there a second one that was close?
I think it might be Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I think that because I have this really hot take on Best Picture that pisses everyone off when I say it. It's not necessarily supposed to be the best movie. There's a reason it goes to the producers and it doesn't go to the director. Now, I'm not saying The Searchers is the best movie. It probably is the best movie of that year, but it does have to be good in quality, but it does also have to, like, reflect the culture of that time. And so, like, that's why I love, like, Kristin, you're saying, like, oh my God, I can't freaking stand the Oscars. That's why I love the Oscars, because they get it wrong sometimes. I think we look at something like Green Book, where like we can look at like what the pulse was at that time. It was this rise against Netflix. It was this really stressful time in America. There's a lot of different ways to pull on that one. And so I love looking back at different years and wondering why they did it. I love looking at Around the World in 80 Days. Obviously, I hate that movie, but I kind of love that won that year. And so like I think about drawing this all the way back to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This was just this very interesting Twilight Zone type movie, mystery type movie, and just this large scale. I really love what this one did. And this would never like make it into the best picture race. I really wish it could though. I think it would if it was like a top 10 and it was now. I really think this would be like the Get Out kind of thing. So I probably would put that as second.
I assume you've also seen the 70s version with Donald Sutherland.
I have seen the 70s version with Donald Sutherland, yeah. And of course that one, it sucks that got spoiled for me because like I've seen the iconic shot. And like I was just like, well, while he's walking around, I was like, oh, damn it. Like that little twist at the end was such a bummer. Like I was like, oh, come on.
Do you prefer the 50s or the 70s version if you had to pick one?
Oh, that's so hard because they're really different. So like that's what I admire about the 70s one because we like to bitch about remakes being like, God, remakes. This is one where it's like, if you're gonna do a remake, make it completely different, do like a completely different style for it. Boy, it's tough. I think I gotta go with I'm just a black and white sucker. So like I'm just gonna be going for the 50s one. No, actually, you know what? I'll go with the 2005 one with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman. That was definitely the better of them. That was really just good stuff all around. Hey, let's call it Invasion. No one will know. Just dynamite move. Well, I don't know, though.
I blacked that out from my memory. Just brought it all back in.
You know, it's funny because you really didn't have to. I think it made $7 at the box office. But I don't know. Robert Duvall on a swing set. Now you got me going. I don't know which one I'm going to pick. It's too good. Like,
I flip-flop all the time on the two because I have a great appreciation for both versions and the distinction between the two, but I definitely flip-flop. Okay, well, let's go over to my Best Picture nominees and my winner, and then we'll round everything off with Kristin, and we'll see if there's anything else kind of left at the table. So here are the 5 films that I have for my nominees. I have A Man Escaped by Robert Bresson. I've got George Stevens' Giant. I've got Stanley Kubrick's The Killing. I've got John Ford's The Searchers, and I've got Tea and Sympathy, which is, again, the one that I had never seen prior to this prep. That movie was a revelation to me. I haven't awarded Tea and Sympathy or The Killing anything up to this point in actual wins, but I do hope if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with either of those films, go check them out, especially if you're somebody who thinks that you love Stanley Kubrick movies because you've seen his more popular ones. Go check out The Killing. It's a fantastic starting point if you want to go. You could start earlier, but if you start there, you can really kind of see the trajectory of his career. I know Kristin's going to pick The Searchers. We haven't gotten there yet, but I have a feeling that's going to happen. So I know The Searchers will be represented now, especially with Sean giving it the win. So I'm going to go with Giant. And hear me out for a moment. So it's a sprawling epic, obviously. It's sort of in the same vein of The Godfather and There Will Be Blood. And now, obviously, in 2024, 2025, The Brutalist is in that same conversation. These long 200-plus minute movies. Giant just captivated me. It kept my attention for the entire runtime. I found the arc of James Dean character to be really interesting. I didn't think it was going to go where it went. So I had to snoop again on Sean's letterbox, and I know he was a little more harsh towards Giant than I'm being right now. I actually found the ending to be, it worked for me personally. I thought the Rock Hudson character arc, without spoiling anything for someone who probably hasn't seen the movie, because I don't think it gets a ton of people nowadays going back to find it. But the story arc of Rock Hudson's character actually works for me. Elizabeth Taylor in the movie is tremendous. There's a scene with her and sort of infiltrating a bunch of men who are having a conversation that don't want her there. And there are just certain moments through that movie that I think all collectively sum up what is a really great movie. And though I know it's not going to win the online vote, and The Searchers is actually the best film of that year, I'm going to give it to Giant just because I want it to get its proper due and sort of be kind of held in that same class as some of those other great epics of the past. So that's why I'm going to pick Giant. It's not necessarily the best picture objectively, but it's going to be my best picture. I went back and rewatched it this week. I cryptically tweeted about it and posted on social media, I'm going back to watch the best film of 1956. And surprisingly, my wife actually watched it with me and was somewhat interested, which I had no expectation of. And so that was like, okay, if she's even paying attention to this half-heartedly, that says something. So that's my win, is Giant. So let's go over to Kristin now to finish things off on Best Picture.
5 nominations for The Searchers.
Well, I'm glad you said Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I thought I was going to be the outlier because we hadn't mentioned any of that yet. And I go back and forth too between which one I love. It depends on which one I've just seen more recently.
Probably.
Yeah, and again, I had my husband sit through both and like tell me what you think, and he likes the 70s more. And I said, but then I go through phases of like, no, I really like the McCarthyism or whatever's being said, and then I'm like, it's so bitter and so depressing. He's like, but that's what makes it a difficult watch. It's just, to me, it's just something that's grown over time that you can revisit. And this rewatch, I liked the Bad Seed a little less, I think, because I was like, no, I'm still beholden to the Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I did keep Giant, and I kept Friendly Persuasion. I feel like I was nicer to Giant this time around. I wasn't fast forwarding just because of James Dean. I mean, I see what it's trying to do, and I also get why they chose Around the World in 80 Days, because, like I said, that was just this era that, yeah, it frustrates me as a movie because it's like, who is the audience for this though? And it is, how much of this was the Todd A.O. stuff and yeah, Elizabeth Taylor and all that kind of exciting stuff, but it's so long. I can't picture kids sitting through this. I can't understand how it has adult attention span to it. You're like, yeah, maybe that part looks cool, or, oh, that part looks nice, but I don't think that it's that good of a film. I get though, yes, why the climate of the time fit the movie. And I feel like, in a weird way, Giants is the film that they nominated as like their slightly controversial pick. Like, yes, we're recognizing Elizabeth Taylor too in this way through this movie, and how it does have the racism undercurrent going through it. And I feel like that's maybe why they didn't touch The Searchers, because The Searchers, that's one of the things that I really love. But I have to predicate it when I do suggest it to people, saying it is a racist film. And the irony that I find absolutely fascinating about it is that it's depicting something very racist, and it's being very preachy about it because we're talking about the post-Civil War. But yet the way the film was made, and the film in itself, is also inherently mid-1950s racist in tone. So it's just such a dual thing, I think, to just sociologically kind of study. And maybe at the time they saw that and they said, we're not gonna touch this. So is that why they put The Searchers out? I don't know. I would add keep the Ten Commandments also. I'm sorry. Probably would be my number 2, even though, again, if we're talking to biblical epics, again, the Blu-ray for Ben-Hur is massive and exceptional. The Blu-ray for the Ten Commandments, you see the incomplete special effects in the movie. You're like, but it's okay. I'm going with it. There are still also, though, some, again, like I said, some really awesome poignant moments in it. But yes, I will ride or die for The Searchers. I feel an obligatory need to defend The Searchers now anymore, because sometimes I see people saying, yeah, I have to watch it for film school. I watched it because it's on Scorsese's list. I don't see what the big deal is. And I'm like, really? So I feel like there was a time, I guess, where New Hollywood or something indie really praised it, and then maybe it had a lull at some point. I hope people come back to finding it now, get the 4K. So, there's a reason why people say, it's such a great movie. I don't know why they didn't pick it, for all the awards. I feel like I'm also surprised it didn't get little things down the line like cinematography or art and color. I mean, especially because it was color and black and white, there was room. Yeah. So or editing sound, I don't understand why it got absolutely no nominations whatsoever. Like, how did you just completely miss this film at all? No.
It does feel like the movie, to your point, it feels like there is some level of backlash, sort of, I've seen in the online community, where people are, and maybe it's just because people are sort of anti-Western at this point in time. They've just seen too many that they're sort of like lashing out at everything that's Western related. But it does feel like there is this subsection of cinephiles out there that's sort of coming at The Searchers and sort of like trying to denigrate it, which is an interesting facet, because I think the movie's kind of objectively perfect almost.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, and I think when you pointed it out, and I think it's just that people hear the tagline of the description of, oh, it's a racist movie. And I remember thinking that, hearing that before I even saw it. And so I had that, like, I had that, like, kind of like chirping in my head. I was like, should I be watching this? It's like that. And so then I watched it and I loved it. And I do agree there's like these problematic undertones, but I do think they explore them in an interesting way. Not that they make good points, like the characters that want to kill her are obviously wrong. Mm-hmm. But I think that's more of like looking at what that time was. And I think that like it's something that could be studied and been like, yeah, this is a problem that the characters wanted to like be this way. explore that. Like, because like Stagecoach has that same exact problem where they're like, just before they get like completely captured by Indians, like one of them's like, should we just kill the woman so that she doesn't have to suffer the defeat? I'm like, boy, this is rough, man.
Mhm.
Like, so I think there's just like maybe people that like just say that, and so then racist is stamped on the movie immediately, and so people don't really want to open it up, which it's a tough time. I do get that. But I think people like, for the people that are like avoiding it just for that, I'd say explore it, take a look at it. This isn't Birth of a Nation. This isn't something that's that horrific. Like, it's, there's other way more racist movies this year. Like,
Yeah.
way more. Like, so
Mhm.
like, just know that this is something interesting.
I feel like it's people don't want to open themselves up to that kind of movie experience either. We're so used to superficial kind of spoon-fed things. And when you watch something like The Searchers and he says, a man will ride a horse till it drops and then he'll go on foot. But a Comanche comes along, he picks up that horse, he rides him another 100 miles and he eats him. And unfortunately, in this country today, we're hearing people speak in that kind of
Literally, yeah.
These kind of people are doing terrible things. So it's like, I think people don't want to watch a movie that's going to have them look at themselves also, and then there's many other more parts in this movie, like the whole segment where he married the Comanche squaw, ha, ha, ha. And, he doesn't want her around. He kicks her. That's grounds for divorce in Texas. These are things that you don't want to say. I'm watching this movie that's supposed to be really racist and dated. And it's from like Civil War era times, and recognize things in ourselves either. And that's what I absolutely love about excellent films, that they should make you do that to yourselves, look at this story and ask what it's saying about then and now and us. So I think it's a film that just keeps on giving in multi.
And I got lucky to watch. It wasn't the only time I watched it for prep, but I got lucky. I was channel flipping one time
Mm-hmm.
and saw it on TCM, and I'm a huge advocate of TCM just in general. It's a great option to find really good stuff and the classic stuff, but they always do like a little like 5 minutes before they show a movie, and they'll sit down with somebody and talk about it. And they had Spike Lee come on and talk about The Searchers. And I love listening to Spike talk films. He obviously teaches at NYU and like he's very versed in it, but it was nice to hear him talk about some of the racist depictions and things in the movie, because I think he gives a really interesting perspective on it. And so I was fortunate to be able to catch it on TCM with that little preface right beforehand, because
Wow.
Yeah.
I love Spike Lee.
I don't even watch that often, believe it or not. Yeah, I watch far more Spike Lee. The same thing when I first saw him say, fuck you and fuck Frank Sinatra, I was like,
well, I love Spike Lee because he's so radical, and so you think like, oh, what are your top 10 directors? And you think, oh, he's gonna do like all black directors. No, he chose like David Lean, Lawrence of Arabia, like John Ford. He's like he's a brilliant student of film. He's an absolute maniac.
Crazy Houseway, like no. No, and yeah, I can't read. Maybe once, twice a year do I rewatch The Searchers. If it comes on some of the TV channels with commercials, I can't watch it. And I did actually see it on the big screen one time. I was like,
oh wow,
it's a cool experience, I bet.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, well, I'll throw out a couple of honorable mentions, and I don't know if either of the two of you have any that just missed your 5. I'm so glad that you both have Invasion of the Body Snatchers in your 5. That was my 6th. It kind of pissed me off that I didn't find room for it anywhere in any of my stuff, because like I love Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That is a great movie that holds up incredibly well, and so I'm so happy that you both have it in there. And then the other one was probably Written on the Wind. Though Early Spring was also in the conversation. I'm a big Ozu guy, so I like that. Anything that either of the two of you almost put in your 5?
Maybe Richard III as a distant.
Yeah. I weirdly have Giant on there, although I didn't really like it that much. I think that like you do have to just acknowledge like the massive scope that had. So I feel like that does have like this best picture kind of written all over it. I had Street of Shame in there. Aparijito, I really loved. A Man Escaped. I love your love for A Man Escaped, dude. I had it like in the or like in the looking on the outside for quite a few of these. And I put in The Man Who Knew Too Much almost as well, because it's so interesting because that's the more popular Hitchcock of these two. And so I was like, you know what? Put that one in picture, put the other one in director, and have audiences lose their minds.
So one of the movies I definitely saw you post about, Sean, on Instagram was A Man Escaped. I remember seeing your review for it, and I'm like, shit, he might just give this thing a best picture. Maybe I was like, I don't know, man. Like I remember you were really into it when I saw you post about it, and I think you gave it an A. Like, I'm pretty confident it
Oh
was
yeah,
in
I
that A
did.
range.
Like, well, this was like those were the first few that I got. Like, so like, and A Man Escaped, obviously at the top of that list you gave. So like, that's the first one I watched. So I'm like, boy, 1956, great year, really psyched.
And
It's
then
gonna go well.
you made it to AR.
Yeah, then it just went down.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, there's going to be 3 options when we get to social media. I'm fairly confident that all of it's going to get pushed in your direction, but that's okay. I'm happy to have Giant in the equation. So Giant will be there. That's my pick. The Academy's got Around the World in 80 Days. We all know that's not going to get any votes, thank goodness. And then both Kristin and Sean have John Ford's classic The Searchers, which I think will probably be the revised Best Picture winner. We'll find out. And if it is, more power to it. It deserves to be up there. Let's jump over. We've got a couple of listener questions before we kind of wrap everything off, and then we'll get to what you two have going on for the rest of the year, and then sign off. So our first listener question comes from our friend Kat over at Veg Out Recipes on Instagram, and Heather Stewart, who both sent the same question. It's what movie from 1956 would you like to see a remake of, and who would you cast in it? Now, obviously, we've already talked about Invasion of the Body Snatchers having multi-remakes. Hitchcock remade his own film, so there are certainly ways you can play with this question. I'll throw mine in real quick. I'll go over to the two of you. I'm gonna go with Tea and Sympathy, which again is a movie that I had never seen prior to prep, and it's a movie that I think deals with homosexuality and some themes that are incredibly resonant today. They obviously were way ahead of their time in 1956, but I think that movie lends itself to a remake because almost nobody is probably familiar with the original. And I would go with the 3 actors that play the 3 lead roles. I'm gonna go Tom Holland as the Tom Robinson character, who's the John Kerr role. He's sort of the young boy in the film. I haven't seen Tom Holland really break out of his shell as a great actor, but I do think it's somewhere lying inside of him. He's going to be in Chris Nolan's The Odyssey, obviously, so maybe that's his chance to shine. So I'm I'm going to go Tom Holland there. There's an older character, a teacher in the film Tea and Sympathy, played by Leif Erikson in the movie. I'm going to go with Glenn Powell as that role. And then his wife is played by Deborah Kerr in the film. And I'm going to go with Emily Blunt playing the Laura Reynolds character. So those are my 3 recasts for that film. Kristin, what about you? Have you thought about this question at all as a remake?
You're killing me, Smalls, with these picks here. Just when I have the vindication for The Searchers, you're killing me. I had to think about this. Heather, I'm sorry. I really don't care for a lot of remakes. And, as we said, some of these were already remakes some of them were better, some of them were worse. And the couple films that have had remakes, Invasion of Body Snatchers, Richard III, I've appreciated those. I do like The Prince of Egypt, but I think, did they try another type of 10 Commandments? A lot of these stories, I feel like they kind of already have been redone. Anastasia was also redone. Is Yellowstone just giant, just in a different Montana's epic, So, I tried to be nice, and could I think of something, but I'm just like, no. I don't think even something like Friendly Persuasion or Tea and Sympathy, I don't think a lot of people could do these kind of stories the way they are done. And in the 50s, they seemed to go through this phase of doing a lot of literary adaptations. And some of them are great. Some of them are really bad. War and Peace. There was also another huge miniseries that I tried. No. And so I don't know that people today could grasp this kind of material, that even as we're poo-pooing that these are just a lot of mid movies, I feel like they were still better filmmaking, and there was still more depth or weight to them, where today's remakes 10 years from now anyway, they'd remake it again. We'd have 2 10 Commandments movies, one from Moses' side, one from Ramsey's side.
One where they were friends in high school.
Yeah.
So what about you?
I'm looking through these, and it is tough because I want the remakes to be unimaginable. Like, I want them to be like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where it is an entirely different thing. Like, I always think, like, most remakes are not great, but like something like Ocean's 11, an entirely different direction, an entirely different way of looking at it. I would wonder if A Man Escaped could work. And like, it's so tricky to remake the foreign films because then those just end up overshadowing the foreign film, and that's always such a like really tough thing because I think of like Speak No Evil or I can't think of a few others right now, but there's always one where it's like, oh, it's a remake of a foreign film, and you don't even think about the foreign film. I think if you did A Man Escaped, you could modernize it to an interesting way, and then like I'm thinking about like the actor. It's a very silent performance. It's a beautiful performance, but it's a very silent performance with a lot of looks. And so I thought like, who has the most beautiful eyes? And then I was like, well, okay, you know what? I'll just rock some colorblind casting. Let's get Daryl McCormick in there and just absolutely like a beautiful human. Like Francois was just like absolutely gorgeous in that role, and I was like, all right, you know what? You got to get someone that's absolutely beautiful. I had Chalamet twerping in the ear right here, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I knew I would get that reaction. It's just like, because we're just don't do a Chalamet here.
No, and today it would be young Chalamet in the prison, but then when he gets grizzled and older, like a couple years later, it would be like Glenn Powell with a beard.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
So I think Daryl McCormick, because I just want this dude to like really like shine. He's like very, very like, he was in the first 2 seconds of Twisters where I was like, man, he's dead. Because I didn't see any advertisements for him. Like, that's not going to be great. So I miss Daryl McCormick, man. Put him in more stuff. He's really good.
I'm glad you mentioned A Man Escape because that was one that I was contemplating maybe using as my answer here. And it didn't hit me until this exact moment because I was like, who could play that role that Leterrier is playing in that film? Maybe Cillian Murphy, who tells a lot. He tells a lot with his eyes, and he's sort of like already kind of gaunt looking. I think he could maybe like pull off the physique of that role that's happening in there. So I could maybe see Cillian Murphy doing that. But to your point, Sean, does anybody remember Infernal Affairs, which is obviously the movie that The Departed became the Best Picture winner, and another round Vinterberg's film from a couple of years ago is being remade by Leo's studio and
that's gonna
his
be bad.
production company?
Like that's actually going to be like, and I don't even mean that as like a bias against remakes, but like the American relationship we have with alcohol versus like the Danish is so different that's just not even going to play well at all. Like, because you think about the premise of that, and it's like, no, we don't do that in America. we're different with that. We're a little bit more guarded with our alcohol. We wait till 5 or 12, and so like I don't know, man. It's like this is gonna be a little bit dicey.
The alcohol, the cigarettes. I mean, when I see these little whippersnappers today, like thinking they're edgy, the way they're trying to hold a cigarette, trying to do cigarette mannerisms, and no. No, like take your little Lucky Gum, little cigarettes, and keep them. No, I don't think anybody has, the gravitas that even the weaker of these films would have. I feel like,
and this is a tough year to find something worthy of a remake. It's just a weird crop of films, so it was hard for me to pick one out of there. The one other question we have, also from Heather Stewart, is she asked us to discuss the significance of Ingrid Bergman's win in light of her return to Hollywood after the quote-unquote scandal, that scandal being the infamous affair she had with Italian director Roberto Rossellini. I have to admit, I'm not hugely invested in this story, so I will turn the floor over to either of the two of you if you want to weigh in. Kristin, do you have much knowledge of this story?
Yeah, it seems really silly nowadays to try and explain this because of all the things we know about Hollywood. I mean, I feel like, what we know maybe not about Kirk Douglas now, also kind of clouded my view, rewatching this time. It's like all the bad things that we think, Judy Garland history, all the torrid, Hollywood Babylon kind of stuff, to think that, oh, this woman that was really loved and respected and was a great actress is cast out because she, went and had an affair, baby, married man. What scandal? It's like, what scandal? As opposed to today's opposite, where it would be paparazzi strolls left and right. So here's my baby bump, revelry or something, or girl power. I'm doing what I want to do. It seems so drastic, the way she was completely cast out, and then the Academy accepted her and welcomed her back like with all such love and vindicate. You're like, really? It's weird. It's very weird. And
when reading this question, I was so nervous because I was like, oh my god, what did Ingrid Bergman do? Wait, what did she do? And then I found out, like, oh, she slept with the director? Okay, like, isn't that what you were supposed to do back then? Like that was like that's part of the rules. Yeah, this was like a big old nothing burger. I guess back then it was important. I mean, it's so funny that Ingrid Bergman was in Casablanca, where they had to change the movie to be like, she thought her husband was dead because God forbid she cheat on the husband and stuff like that, which is just like the most like heinous thing in the world. And I think about this, and right now, like, this would absolutely mean small potato. I mean, I think about a potential winner this year. Ariana Grande was almost canceled for sleeping with someone else's husband, and it was just like, the husband's fine, but Ariana Grande is the monster for doing it. It's like, we're still doing this. I mean, it's not as drastic, obviously, like, because she's fine, but like, it's just so strange that those things like are still there.
And is this again a deeper social issue? I mean, the way we laugh at this 50s taboo scandal cast out here, but yet you see that their Hollywood played politics then. Around the World in 80 Days, Todd A.O., Ingrid Bergman, In and Out, all the different Trumbo blacklist that was happening at the time. But then we see Hollywood playing these same in and out politics now, and we went through the whole Weinstein era. So it's like, this shouldn't be anything new that they've got their favorites. And the way people rise and fall along with this stuff, like, you can't, laugh at the 50s one and then act like it doesn't exist now either, because I'm sure there are going to be people who were, if Angelina Jolie doesn't get nominated for anything, people are going to say, is it her political leanings? Is it because Brad Pitt has friends? So, so don't laugh about Ingrid Bergman then when these kind of things happen now too. So poo-poo awesome.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one when this question came over. I thought, what did I miss? Was there like some heinous thing that Ingrid, did she kill someone?
Yeah.
And I read up on it. And I was like, oh, it's just that. Okay. Yeah, it's all, yeah.
And the love for Isabella Rossellini anyway, the product of this terrible thing. And look how wonderful, gravitas she turned out to be. So, okay.
Yeah, very, very silly nothing burger. I think that's a good way to describe that one. Thanks to everybody for sending the questions. This was an odd year for questions, so we got significantly less than we got on 2016, which we got 30 plus, and it was just a chaotic experience for that one. So thanks to have a little mercy on us for these questions. I appreciate that. That's going to do it for the recording, but this is only the beginning, because now that our picks have been made, it's going to be up to you, the fans, the listeners, to decide what goes into the Almanac as the true winners. We'll be putting up social media polls across 5 social media platforms in the coming days, and need your votes to be cast. The more places you follow, the more opportunities you have to vote. Before we sign off, though, let's talk a little bit about what's on the way for 2025 for the two of you. So this episode is going to go up Friday, February 7th. Kristin, you've got a ton going on. You're doing everything over there at In Session Films, all your other endeavors. What does the next couple of months have in store for you? It's award season. Is there a lot going on over at In Session with your...
That's funny. Friday, February 7th is my birthday. Actually, same day as Charles Dickens.
Happy birthday.
That's funny. That timing worked out. But we've actually been going through a James Bond series, actually, on the Women in Session podcast, revisiting that. So yeah, I'm not an awards person. I left awards 10 years ago, and I was really glad that I did so. Felt so carefree. And of course, this year, I got, drugged back into peeking at who was involved. And I'm looking at this like, y'all are crazy. This is insufferable. This is, there's some cutthroat shit going on here.
This is a weird year.
Around? Like, are you kidding me?
Weird year. This is not how it normally goes. This is insane right now.
I'm like, what's the post-pandemic thing? I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So yeah, so it's going to be tough, navigating awards and not getting myself worked up over that. Yeah, I also did have an article at Search Magazine. Instead of talking about movies and TV, I actually interviewed some of the other ladies from the Women in Session podcast. So that was kind of fun to get a little perspective. We do critic spotlights too, where I much prefer, again, this whole phase of influencers and film critics glowing about all these movies every week. And I'm like, is this non-spons? Did they send you the swag, or why are you promoting this movie? That's what I'm suspect over some people. So I'm not into also, interviewing a lot of big people. I'm much more interested in interviewing critics or wanting to know what films are special for us for a reason. So it's a real privilege to get to be able to have the different women's perspective, on that podcast. And I guess people were kind of like, oh, you're talking about James Bond? I'm like, yes, I'm talking about James Bond. Deal with it. So what that's going to mean for 2025 in the grand scheme of things, who knows? But hopefully keeping it focused on movies, hopefully.
I can definitely say I love everything under the In Session Film umbrella.
Right,
all the work that you all collectively do. There's a ton of people involved, I know, behind the scenes, and you're all doing great work. The Women on Film stuff, some of my favorite stuff out there. I love the content you put out. Would you mind sharing with people who are listening, watching right now, what your social media handles are so they can find you if they're not already following?
Sure. Well, my blog is, I think, Therefore I Review. So Therefore Review. I am still on Twitter, lingering there. It's such a hot mess, but the same on, Blue Sky, and K-Bat's Craft is what we chat on Instagram. That's where, if I'm doing more DIY articles and Halloween projects and fun horror things like that. So yeah, and I'm trying to find all the people that I had on Twitter so I can get rid of Twitter, on other platforms. So yeah, we're all over the place. I do have a YouTube channel that I probably should keep up to date more, but I don't want to fall into being a slave to the algorithm.
I was really hoping we were going to get you back into awards season with the guy. I know for anyone who follows you on
We're
social
going
media,
there.
Guy Pearce is your guy. You're a ride or die Guy Pearce person. It felt like The Brutalist. I haven't seen it yet. I was supposed to go see it tomorrow. We got a snowstorm here in town, so I'm seeing it next Friday. I hear he's fantastic in it, but it doesn't sound like he's gonna really be in the conversation with Kieran Culkin taking everything. So
welcome to my life, the best 25 years. Seeing an excellent Guy Pearce movie and then being like, nobody else is going to recognize or acknowledge this ever. Okay, no, that's disappointing. And that's happened, I don't know, 10 times. I just was speaking to someone that said, I'm a film critic and I've never heard of the proposition. And I kind of wanted to say, I'm sorry, I kind of wanted to say, well, then you can't call yourself a film critic. How could you miss a film like this? It's infuriating, I guess. It's a catch-22 because I do see Johnny Come Lately people saying, well, he's my sleeper pick. Maybe I've liked him all along. And then they're like, yeah, Iron Man 3. And I'm like, yeah, no.
Well, no, The Time Machine. I mean,
educate yourself.
The Time Machine was fantastic.
Well, hopefully, Kristin, I can let you rest a little bit easier tonight, knowing that later this year on the show, we will be revising 2001. And I guarantee you, Guy Pearce is going to be heavily in the discussion. I know my guests, I know myself. So
that's the one you could put on my tombstone.
There you go. So again, all your information is going to be in the description of this podcast. So anyone who's listening to this, find Kristin on all the socials. She's great follow. I love talking movies with you. Sean, you are also on all the socials, I know. It seems like Instagram's definitely your go-to.
It's my big
Math Teacher Movies.
Yeah. I try to do the Blue Sky and the Twitter thing. I just the format of those, I don't really have many thoughts. And so, I sometimes I'm just like, Jerry Jones will probably win an Emmy this year for Landman. And, that's all I'm going to put in there. Just because he's in Landman. Because Landman exists. And I mainly do Instagram and I do reviews on there. I still do, although the podcast has officially been disbanded with me and my guy Joe from Guy at the Movies. We're still good friends. Nothing bad happened. We just couldn't really agree on times. And so I still do a column, an Oscar column, Awards Outlook on his website. So every week I try to predict the awards like crazy. And this year has been impossible because I did my nomination predictions and then the SAG nominations came out. And I said, I'm just going to delete the article. This is an absolute mess. It's truly a mess. And so it makes it more fun because it's not as boring. We really don't know who's going to win anything. There's a couple of dead shots, but really not many. So it's fun. I'm excited, but also stressed.
It's hard to equate what year this kind of feels like. I was talking to somebody yesterday about it. It kind of feels like 2011, which I did last season, and so it's kind of fresh in my memory still, but that was the year The Artist famously won, and there wasn't really a clear defined front runner, and there was just a lot of good stuff. That's kind of what's going on right now, at least from my perspective.
I mean, I see this as the Green Book year. It's just, there's a bunch of little front runners, and this is just going to be something where it's going to settle on something. I think it's either going to be Conclave or Emilia Perez. I don't think The Brutalist has the juice. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know. Although I know that something like The Brutalist, a 3 hour, 45-minute movie, that's beautiful looking. It's of course I'm going to love that. What are we saying here? Of course I'm going to absolutely adore this movie. What are we saying? I don't need to review it. I will, but...
I'm naive and innocent and hopeful. I see people doing this of 7 out of 11 times, this critic association and this one and this one and this one picked a winner. But if this doesn't get nominated for Best Picture, then this person won't get into it. But one time this did happen, and 4 other times this association predicted this. And I'm why are you pretzeling yourself into all these precursors that mean nothing? I'm why are you giving yourself, we would say agita. Why? They mean nothing. And then I'll say that. I said it literally comes down to, did the old white dudes stay awake for all the movies? And they're no, there's more to it than that. And I'm no, there's not.
In 2020, though, all the Critics Awards went to First Cow. And as you know, that won 17 Oscars. So I know that, First Cow is going to lock it in this year, too. So The critics definitely know what they're doing. They have their finger on the pulse of the Academy.
I mean, if you saw the movie and liked it and enjoyed it and thought it was good, have anything to do with the awards? Apparently not. And I find that is what's just the biggest, most infuriating thing to me. I mean, yeah, when you have an actor like Guy Pearce who's never been recognized and yet, has some of the greatest films of the 21st century, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm getting blue in the face that I have to keep explaining this to people. Like, did you not see The Rover? Did you not see Brimstone? Again, A24. It's like, what were you doing? That it's frustrated to me that it's like the better movies are not the award winners. Then why are the award winners the bar? Maybe we should be rethinking this whole thing. So yeah, I had taken myself out of it and taken a glance at it. Now there's so many gifts where I just want to just shut the door, just let that dumpster fire go. Just, there's already too many bad things happening in 2025. It's like, I can't afford my sanity to pay attention to these awards. I don't know how you guys do it. Bless you.
For this show, I have a hard rule where I won't cover a year that's within the last 5 years of whatever year we're in, because I think that the whole premise of this show is like some time needs to exist for things to settle into culture to really determine what the best is long term. And so it's going to be fascinating if I'm still doing the show in 2030. What I revise from 2024, because there are some films that I think are standouts that are not getting, like Dune Part 2 is getting unfairly sort of left out of the equation because it came out in March effectively, and it's just not in the conversation. And regardless if people love or don't love Dune Part 2, I think it's definitely one of the 10 best films and should be a Best Picture
I
nominee,
said
but
that
it's
to
not.
people that were excited to see challengers get a few things, were surprised that it was missing. And I thought, well, it's your own fault, because who's going to remember the movies from last January? That's what you get for having this ride or die best week ever. Oh my God. Like, people were talking about A Complete Unknown for months before anybody even actually saw it. And I said, what the hell are we doing here?
But then you look something like Everything Everywhere All at Once that comes out in April and like stays in the conversation for the longest time, or Nomadland that comes out, or like, Parasite, and the Parasite was a fall release, but it was still something that came out in Cannes and does have this like growth throughout it. And so I wonder, because sometimes like a movie comes out too late and it just like skips through. I think of Iron Claw, where like audiences adored that movie, and like it just got passed up for everything because I think it just came out way too late. And then, I think about Dune Part 2, and I don't know if it's his fault, but I'm going to blame Zaslav, because let's do it. Because, like, let's face it, that dude doesn't care about his studio at all. So probably there's like no campaign going for that movie. And I think it's skirting in there on its quality alone. And that's a tough move to make.
It's so weird because, like, another great example of a movie that's just like probably coming out Iron Claw style too late is Sing Sing, which had this like really weird short release for a couple weeks, and then it's coming back out in like the next 2 weeks, which feels like too far out.
Some of these films that are going to have 2023 festival dates,
Yeah.
and yet the general public hasn't even seen them yet. It's like, they're just the industry disparity, and yeah, are they going to still continue to choose their favorites? Was it last year, the year before, for Lark? Yeah, in session they asked me, and I said, okay, fine, I'll throw out knee-jerk picks that I didn't even know I didn't see after movies. I said, there's no way that Jamie Lee Curtis is going to win. And then I'm like, really? After Oscar So White, you awarded the white woman in the Asian? I'm like, good job, everyone. Good job. Wonderful. Like, really? Seriously? And again, it just reiterated, everything all the problems that I have with this. And now she just popped up in the conversation again out of the blue for Last Showgirl, which I was really excited of, like, okay, again, Pamela Anderson getting some due on a real, again, life imitating art kind of reflection movie where Hollywood will either embrace, they love to pat themselves on the back. Maybe that's why critics are poo-pooing The Brutalist. They don't like this anti-capitalism kind of conversation. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith.
It's amazing the Jamie Lee Curtis thing really quickly, because I like actively avoid trailers and like synopsis because I want to go into as many movies as I had no idea she was in the film. I was like, what? Jamie Lee Curtis is in that movie? Yeah, that threw me for a loop. The SAGs, like you said, Sean, you might as well rip up and throw out everything you have that you thought you knew before SAG, because those nominations were wild.
Jonathan Bailey?
I don't know who he is, honestly.
I'm like stunned at that one. I mean, there's so many that just threw me for a loop, but it'll be an interesting one.
And I guess in summation, like I said, my problem with 80s Oscars, like, again, when you look at some of the Best Picture nominees there, it's like, if you cannot recall that movie by name. Oh yeah, that was this movie where this happened, that happened. Then it's not worth a nomination. And that's how a lot of these movies felt too. You're going through this like, yeah, no, they could have kept it. They could have kept it.
Absolutely. Well, again, you can find everything Sean and Kristin are doing in the description. I'll, of course, obviously be posting on social media, blasting and promoting the heck out of both of your pages because love everything the two of you do. I'm a big, big fan personally. So it was an honor to have you both on the show.
Thank you.
And you can also look out for the upcoming, absolutely, guys. Look out for the upcoming third episode of the season in March, where I'm going to be joined by Clarissa Beckstead, aka I've Seen That on Instagram, and Sarah Shea from the incredible Shea Cinema podcast. The three of us are going to roll the clock back further than we've done so far on the show, all the way back to 1934, which was most notable for It Happened One Night dominating the Oscars and claiming Best Picture. What's going to be crazy about that episode is at that particular time in Oscars history, there were no supporting actor and actress categories. So what we're going to do is we're going to create those categories and award some people who deserve recognition for supporting actor and actress that didn't actually have an opportunity that year. So we're going to really flip the script because the Oscars had no clue what they were doing in 1934, and we're going to fix that for them.
Are you going to keep like the 50-11 just picture tops that they had?
We're gonna try to get everything into the type concept that I've got for this because I think there's like 3 director nominations that year and 4 actor, and it's all over the place. So we're gonna like really fit it in. But that'll be a fun one. Looking forward to having the two of them on. Again, you can find me in this show on Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, Letterboxd, Threads, TikTok, everywhere. Rev Almanac. There's gonna be timestamps on this, so you can go back and check out a specific category if you want to listen. Again, Kristin and Sean's stuff's gonna be in the social media pages here. And it was a pleasure having the two of you on. I am truly humbled to have spent a couple hours with you both.
Thank you.
I'm also, I feel like I owe an apology to every guest that ever comes on this show for the prep process I put you through because I'm months in and it's a wild ride month to month. And so I feel bad putting everyone through this.
I would have never watched The Wrong Man, I don't think. I mean, it wouldn't have crossed my purview. So, there's always these fun little discoveries throughout.
Well, and spoiler, you spoke too soon. I think we had penciled in the future that we were going to talk about 1997 together. So you're going to put me through the ringer by making me watch Titanic.
That is correct. You have signed up for another episode, which if you want to go down that road again, you're more than welcome to because these projects are definitely big endeavors. Like I said, I'm eternally grateful for both of you for being on. It was completely my pleasure, my honor to have you here. That's going to do it for this episode, though. I am, of course, Andrew, and I cannot wait to see you next time.